this meeting back to order. I'm looking for a motion to come out of back into session. Sure. Councillor Buckingham, followed by a seconder. Councillor Dyson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. For those that are joining us this afternoon, thank you very much. I just want to remind everyone that this meeting is for discussion and information gathering only. All decisions will occur during council meetings. We thank all our presenters at this time for their time today. Each presenter, I understand, inform them that their presentations are for 5 minutes, but you ask you to stay remaining at the mic for questions from members of council after your presentation. So moving on to the agenda item number 4.1, we have the Lloydminster Regional Archives Association. So I'll ask them to come forward, please.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and councillors.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for the opportunity to make a presentation on behalf of our community's memory. The Lloydminster Regional Archives has been in operation for 20 years now, a bit of a milestone for us. And our board and those responsible for founding the archives recognize that a great many important and commendable things have been done by people and organizations in Lloydminster since its founding. And just as the saying goes, if something is worth doing, it's worth doing well, so to it, if something is worth doing well, it's worth remembering. And the job of the archives that we've taken on is to provide the institution for that memory. Over the years, we've collected tens of thousands, I can't even count them, of documents and maps and about 20,000 photographs that reflect our community's development from its inception. As well, we're placing a great deal of emphasis on digitizing much of our collection so that it is accessible online for students in our schools, community members interested in local history, and indeed researchers anywhere in the world to have ready access. So we are a developing organization. As long as history carries on day by day, hopefully we'll be in a position to record the important local people and events of our time. Our request is very similar to that which was made last year, and so I won't belabor the point too much. You will note that in addition to the operating deficit that we're asking council to address, this year's figure also includes the notional rent associated with our space over at the Lloydminster Cultural and Science Centre. All of the other background information has been provided to you, and I'd be more than pleased to answer any questions that there might be.
Thank you. I'd ask the presenter just to state his name for the minutes for this meeting, please.
Okay. I am Dr. Don Duncan, President of the Lloydminster Regional Archives Association.
Thank you. Any questions of Dr. Duncan? I guess the one that I did have for you, Dr. Duncan, I know you alluded to it, but in your presentation that we received, how often does the city access the archives on it? Do you have any idea? Do they find it sometimes weekly, monthly, yearly? Because you seem to be the keeper of all sorts of knowledge.
We, I would say quite safely, we get at least one request every month and possibly more. The obvious requests, I guess, or the easiest ones to deal with are those that come from our neighbors in the cultural center. If they're mounting a display of war participation, for example, they come to us for the photographs. Because, and other city departments, we've had people come from the planning department as downtown redevelopment is looked at. We have probably more on our shelves than any individual department might have. And the good thing about our collection is that it is all cataloged and accessible. And also, of course, bearing in mind the need to conserve documents, we make sure that the documents as they're stored are kept in an archival standard so that they don't deteriorate.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments?
I'd just like to, I've had the privilege of sitting on the board for the last couple of years, and very well-oiled machine. They do a wonderful job. They've got great dedicated staff, great dedicated board of directors, and you know, we stand up to the standard of those up to the most scrutiny. It's just it's phenomenal what they've done. The website is second to none, and yeah, I'd just like to commend Donna as president and all the board members and staff for the job that they do for the community and keeping our memory fresh.
Thank you, Councillor Fagnan. If I may add, our volunteers do a tremendous amount of work. We have probably between 30 and 40 hours of volunteer service every week from people who really are concerned about preserving our history.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just had a comment and one question. One is just around Alberta Casino. So every 3 years you get a grant and they kind of let you know the year before how much it's going to be, or is it a consistent amount? That's my first question, I guess.
It's a complex system. The licenses for the Alberta Casino and Lloydminster falls within the zone served by the Camrose Casino. And the licenses are allocated to not-for-profit groups based on the number of applications they get. A few years ago, we were able to get a license every second year. Of late, because there are more not-for-profit groups applying, that has been bumped back to once every 3 years. And goodness knows, as demands increase, that may become less frequent as well.
So just on the casino, in the past, has the archives, have they created their ask associated with how much they were getting in that year, or do you normally look at that as, you know, let's say this $9,000 is to last you 3 years? Do you look at it that way, and your kind of internal budgeting is, well, we got to hold on to that cash for the next 3 years? I'm just curious.
Our accountant, when we submit our accounts to Leckie and Associates, tells us to split the money up. And typically we do that, we take the receipts. This year, our casino, or this coming year, 2019, we expect that our casino will be in the third quarter.
Okay.
And given how slowly some of the wheels grind at AGLC, it's usually 2 or 3 months after the fact that we get our check. The instruction from the accountant is that for this year, we should ascribe about a third of the money to 2019. The remaining funds will be ascribed to 2020.
Perfect. So I just on my question would be, if that is the case and some of this money is going to be put to a future period, are you actually going to have closer to a $6,000 shortfall if you're looking at taking those funds over a few years rather than having the whole $9,000 in the current year? Trying to do you a favor while also being mindful of our role here. The other thing I just wanted to look at is, I know that your group is asking for basically 10% less of an ask, and that's including that $9,000 figure to get there. So there's tough times and we've got to cut things here and there. as things go on, and I can appreciate that that's the strategy that the archives has taken, is taking only what you need. But I do want you to be mindful that you might be actually looking at a $6,000 shortfall rather than being at 300 even.
I've always been reluctant to spend money I don't have. And I think that the allocation of, we don't know exactly what the casino proceeds are going to be. The past couple of casinos that we've done have yielded something in excess of $20,000 each. And depending on the formula that HELC uses, what they do is to pool the proceeds from the St. Albert Casino and the Camrose Casino by quarter. And then they divide up those proceeds equally among the not-for-profit groups that have provided volunteers for those two casinos in the quarter. And so we anticipate something in excess of $20,000. But
oh, sorry, I think I misunderstood then. That $9,000 isn't the total, that's just 1 year's. I was thinking that you were saying that that $9,000 is going to be your total for 3 years. I think that's where my confusion is. Never mind.
The $9,000 is that which we can reasonably count on to bring into revenue in 2019.
Perfect.
The balance of the funding, probably another 11 or 12 or 14,000, we don't know, would be ascribed to revenue in 2020.
You're all good.
And in 2020, if we were to come back and engage in this exercise again, the ask from the archives would be reduced accordingly.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Buckingham, I believe you had a question.
Thank you, Worship. And Councillor Torres alluded to it a little earlier, as we're looking at all the third-party asks, and thanks, Dr. Duncan, for your presentation. We're looking at all these things, and fortunately or unfortunately, you've got this city council to be the good stewards of your tax dollars, however which way you'd like to look at it. When I'm looking at these things, I wonder how much of it is benefiting the whole community, and how much of it we can count on to be, how can I go out to people and say, I supported the archives, or I supported the Big Jew, or I supported the SPCA because of the reach. What I didn't hear today was, we talked about, I think the mayor had asked about how much the city itself had actually accessed the archives for information. Can you give us a bit of a breakdown, or as you see it, as how the community as a whole accesses the archives and how much uptake there is on that in the course of the year?
Okay. I don't have the exact figures, but I can tell you anecdotally, on any given operating day, we would get approximately half a dozen community members in with inquiries. We get on a regular basis inquiries from local media. We get on a regular basis, irregular basis, I suppose, requests from the city. We have a developing relationship with the two school systems in Lloydminster. We have classes, in fact, from E.S. Laird Middle School that make regular visits to the archives. We also, by virtue of putting important parts of our collection online, we have data, and I don't have the number, I'm sorry, about the number of visits to our website. As Councillor Fagman indicated, our website works very, very well as a search tool, and we see an increasing amount of traffic there as well.
Yep, I've been there myself, so again, I think we're having these discussions in a public forum. That's the information that the public may or may not know, and they should know. Right? So the last question I have is a follow-up to that. As you're saying, you're getting 6 or so a day. How many operating days can the public come and see you in the course of a year? How much time is the archives actually completely accessible without going online or anything like that?
We're open 4 days a week, 5 hours per day, Tuesdays through Friday. And again, we have 2 part-time staff members who divide those hours up. The only overlap we have in staffing is on Wednesday afternoon, so that we can facilitate communication between the 2 workers and yet keep the operation as lean as possible. I think, if we take a look at a lot of the management literature, I think we have the optimum balance. We have paid staff, we have volunteers contributing extensive service, and we have a governing board that cares and that keeps things heading in the right direction. And I think the management literature is very clear that that kind of balance among the elements provides the best service to the public.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I guess if I could leave one last question, Dr. Duncan. I know you've approached the city. Have you approached any of our neighboring partners in the municipality world for support for this? Because I believe you cover a good piece of ground, not just the city, but from a rural perspective.
The short answer is no, we have not. I think, without being facetious, we try to use our time effectively. And I think less facetiously, the fact of the matter is that we are now approaching the point where the value of our collection is much higher than it was as it was beginning. We've got much more to offer the public. We've got much more that we could offer to our municipal or neighboring municipalities as well. I think we're at the point where perhaps a case could be made. How effective that case would be received? Question.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Just a quick question to chase that a bit, because I'm thinking that, so should those who benefit pay, I guess, is the other thing. If the municipalities want the time, is there a billing process that we could add in? So if they are outside of the city and the city is subsidizing the cost then through, volunteers, through paid work and efforts like yourself, Don, and then contributions from tax dollars, if municipalities ask for information, perhaps there's a billing process that on an hour-by-hour basis, no different than FOIP or something to that effect.
Actually, in our policy structure, we do have a set of charges that for research are on an hourly basis. We also charge on a per copy basis, for example, for paper copies of documents, and we have a schedule of fees for photographic reproductions as well. Those policies would apply to other municipalities were they to make a request.
So would that show up under this ministry recovery, or is it substantial, or pretty trivial?
It's relatively minor.
Okay. Darn.
It is in the numbers, though, yes.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, Dr. Duncan.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks.
Moving on to agenda 4.2, Saskatchewan Health Authority. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Can I ask you to state your name again, please?
Yes, you betcha. It's Tiffany McNaughton. I'm with the Health Region. I am an exercise therapist, and I run the Strides program currently. It is a cardiac-based program, I'm a registered nurse, and we are a formal program that supports exercise and education in a safe, supportive environment. Strides is also intended for people who are at risk of a chronic disease, such as lung disease, diabetes, arthritis, stroke, and kidney disease. It's a 12-week program, and it's to help people improve or maintain their quality of life while living with a chronic condition. Chronic disease, unfortunately, is no longer an old person's disease. The majority of our clientele are actually under the age of 65, and we really want to prevent some cardiac events from happening in the future for them. And exercise is a great way to prevent another heart attack. And it's known fact that every day of exercise lowers the risk by 1%. So it's quite great, as well as any chronic condition, exercise can help manage symptoms and improve your health. So a large part of our program is developing a regular exercise routine, which just becomes part of their lifestyle. And completing the 12 weeks, you'll sit down with me, we'll make an exercise program for you to hopefully continue after you leave the program. So it's with this in mind that we are requesting 2 free facility passes for the Administered Service Center for our participants upon the graduation from our program. We frequently discuss using the track facility and exercise equipment as part of their long-term goals. And we have up to 15 new clients start strides each month, and many of them do attend with a support person or family member. However, not all our clients continue with the program until graduation, nor will they actually want a facility pass. But I feel a free pass is a great way to encourage clients that are unfamiliar or hesitant to using the facility to go and try it out. As well as we can target our younger clientele who need to return to work and are unable to attend our program, or they could use the service center as part of their own rehabilitation. We recognize and highly promote the building and the free walking track for seniors to our participants, but as I mentioned, majority of our clientele are under the age of 65 and aren't able to use that free service just yet. Currently, North Balford and the Strides program there have a very similar partnership with the city, and they have for years, and they use their city building for free, as well as they have unlimited passes to hand out for their participants, and it's been amazing for their participants, so we're just trying to kind of mimic that as we can. And we'd love that type of partnership to prevent hospitalizations and maintain their healthy lifestyles for our participants. I see it also as a benefit for our service center, as we get people through their door and comfortable with the building, free for a couple times, and they will continue to use it as they please going forward. It's kind of a formal partnership between the health authority and the city for people's health, and it would be a great civic contribution for the citizens with our guided rehabilitation program. Thank you for your sincere consideration. I'm open for all questions.
Thank you, Tiffany. Questions from Councillor Baker?
Thank you, Worship. Well, thank you, Colleen, for your presentation. This is just a little more information for you. You're talking about walking tracks and gym equipment or whatever. Participant Park, the Kinsman Participant Park, just developed an outdoor gym and with the new walking track. And for the summer program, you might add that to your program. And we're going to charge you for it. That's located just south of Bishop Lloyd,
Okay.
about a block, and on the right-hand side. You should do a look at it. It's really quite impressive.
That's really good to know. Thank you.
It was just all rebuilt this summer,
Amazing.
so it's something for your information. It's just for information.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Torres?
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't want to discount this program by any means. I think it makes a lot of sense and is good for health and good for public health and everything. The only part, and this has nothing to do with you, you're the messenger, I struggle with the fact that this is a government agency, so a provincial government that is essentially, for our purposes, mom or dad, who, as far as I'm concerned, are meant to give us money, which is in turn asking us for money to pay for a service. So that's it's only in principle that, I don't know if I'm crazy about it. The only thing is, this is in kind, it's not real money that's being asked for, it's merely a waiving of fees. And as far as I can see, it seems as though that dollar amount is not going to be astronomical, but when I see this program coming from the Sask Health Authority, to me, I'm going to be honest, I struggle with it. And that has nothing to do with you, but it's a provincial government that's asking for us to fund one of their programs. And it just seems backwards to me. So I apologize around the table if you guys look at the world very differently, but.
And it's not funding for our program, but unfortunately we don't have any other programs to send them to after us. And we have so many people come in the door weekly that I don't want to just say fly and go find your own. I would just love to be able to send them somewhere.
I understand, and I know this is coming completely from the right place. So that's why I don't want to discount it at all. But just having the Sask Health Authority at the top, just, maybe is a bit of a thorn in my side. But the program itself really isn't going to cost the city real money. It's opportunity cost and could potentially lead to, real passes being sold and real money coming in the door later on, as well as promoting the health and recovery of all these people. So just so you know that I'm on the fence as far as reading this. It's a struggle for me just because of the title at the top. But thank you, it was a great presentation.
Councillor Gaich.
Tiffany, good idea, good program. When I was down in Okotoks many years ago, traveling with AAA hockey, the doctors in Okotoks actually provide a free swim every Sunday afternoon. So when I returned, I spoke to a couple of doctors, and they basically just shut me down until they get lost. And so I'm wondering, we have some pretty good people within the city now that are good at fundraising, and I'm wondering if maybe we can connect you with them around putting something like that together. Because I think this is not a big cost, but I think it really has the potential to be something even bigger. Because there are a lot of facilities, I think there are a lot of people that otherwise had the resources to be able to attend and do, it would affect probably a larger group. This one's very specific around people that you've identified there. But I'm just thinking that within our own medical community, I know there is a spirit of philanthropy. They also believe in their patients getting well outside of that too. And maybe the time is right now when this kind of question can be put through our people helping you, where it can become something a little bigger, where it becomes the pool, service sports center, and it can be family oriented, it can be oriented to these folks in this program as well. But I just, again, I think in this context, it makes it a little tougher around what we're doing, even though notwithstanding what Councilor Torres would have said. But I like it. I think it's a great idea, but there may be a better way to do this that we can make it happen without having to come here and do this stuff.
I agree. Thank you.
Okay.
I guess my question is around the same format. Have you applied to anyone else?
We spoke to the Multiplex Service Center the last few years, and they just haven't been able to really get back to us and being able to give us the passes. I'm unsure of the process on their end. They've never really given us a reason, but that's really the only place I've reached out, because I love that it has an indoor walking track for our 12 months of winter we have sometimes. But I definitely could reach out to other facilities in town, but that's just been our...
Okay. Have you reached out to any other charitable organizations or organizations?
I have not.
No problem. Thank you very much. Any other questions? Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on to agenda 4.3, the International Festivals Administered Society. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Kima Mansuray. I'm the local immigration partnership coordinator. Here today I'm talking on behalf of the International Festival of Administered, which I helped form with Susan a few months ago. So the goal of the festival is to bring together all multicultural communities, all citizens of Lloydminster together and celebrate in a festive way. And this will enable people to come together to break in their isolation and stress and other things that are going through, because we do have few activities going on in Lloydminster that everybody is participating in. So the goal of this festival is to bring everybody at least to have this on a yearly basis, so that everybody can come together to celebrate their cultural activities. And wherein I happen to have helped organize similar festival in Edmonton, wherein we have all levels of government participating and every communities represented in that festival. The benefits this festival will bring, let's take into business. This will help local businesses to participate in it, and it will actually help the economy in Lloydminster, because people will be selling food during this festival and will be able to employ people during this festival. So And the economic spin, I've talked about that already in terms of the businesses and new people that will be new entrepreneurs who have never done something will be motivated to actually do something with the help of this festival. And also, it is an avenue where local artists can be promoted. Usually, in a bigger stage, usually these artists, they have their talent and they don't have the opportunity where their talents can be showcased. So during this festival, we'll be able to showcase their talents in a bigger stage where it will be not only having people from Lloydminster, but we're also attracting people from the surrounding areas, even as far as Edmonton and Calgary and Saskatoon, and to come to Lloydminster during this festival. It would also be a good opportunity to partner with businesses like the banks and other organizations to make this festival a success. It is an opportunity for the city to see how diverse and what is actually is available in Lloydminster through this festival. That will help take away the stress, the isolation, and the mental health that people are going through whilst they are here. This activity is aimed at doing that. I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions from Council? Council Patrick.
Thank you very much for the presentation. So you're registered as a non-profit society. Are you aware of any grants from provincial government? Because I know typically there are some funds that flow to support this very event that you're talking about.
Exactly. We have actually in process, but one of the criteria is to have the local municipal government support, either in kind or in cash, for them to actually support those. And they are ready. We've talked to them. We have a discussion with them, but some of the criteria is that the Alberta government, the tourism, Saskatchewan, SAS Lottery, Salvos Credit Union here in Lloydminster, the Royal Bank, Synergy, we've all approached all of these organizations. Yes, we have also one of the criteria in some of those grants is to have, because we are doing a festival for the community, they want a local support from the municipal government.
Okay. So just a follow-up question, I guess, that will there be admission costs for people to get in?
No, it will be free, and that's why we are asking for this grant, so that it gives an opportunity for everybody, every culture, young and old. There will be activities for children, there will be activities for old people, and there will be activities for everybody. And as I said, it is an opportunity to promote our local artists in a wider stage, and we'll also be bringing other people, and this will attract other people from other parts of the surrounding areas to actually be looking forward to coming to Lloydminster every year for this festival.
Yeah, the only question I have, I guess, as I look at it, is that 6,000 of the 10,000 is for a meal for the volunteers, as opposed to ultimately benefiting the people who will be attending as well. And it's free to go in, and yet the vendors would be making money on it. So we would be using tax dollars to support a cause where businesses could go in and make money, with us paying for them to, in essence, kind of do it. So there are some challenges in sort of, working my way through that. And yet I see that, over half the amount you're asking for, the 10,000, is for the volunteers.
Yes, we are asking for 7,000 cash and then the rest in kind. The good part of the businesses is that there are some local businesses that some start entrepreneurs. We are promoting them so that they can have an opportunity to start up a business, and in the long run they will establish a business. We have been approached by people who want to start up a restaurant. So this is an opportunity to showcase. In the long run, it will bring benefits to Lloydminster. So that's the overall goal that we're looking at.
Councilor Torson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for your presentation. I'm just curious, up to this point, what level of support have you got from the different groups that you have approached? RBC, Service, any of those groups?
Synergy, we did have one of the members who actually, one of the staff there who even encouraged us to send in a request. It's based on our presentation to them. We went to open up an account, and during the conversation about it, they encouraged us to submit. And in terms of the other businesses, we have got, before we actually submitting request, we have a discussion, just like the city. We had a discussion with some staff members of the city about the proposal before we actually submit a request. So we have done some of those, and we've got some encouragement from some of the supporters or sponsors.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much. My other question, I thought I heard you say something along your grant application. There was a requirement from the Alberta government for what, sorry?
It's the federal government. They have, through the Heritage, Canada Heritage, they have a requirement which we talked with Patrick about, and we showed Patrick that one of the requirements there is that you do have to have a municipal support before they can fund you for that particular grant. So that's either in kind or cash. That's what is stated in the application.
Okay. Thank you very much.
I've got a couple of questions, unless anybody else has people.
Just a quick one as far as the amount of volunteer scheme that you're expecting to have there.
So we are looking at, we're looking about 50 to 100. That's what we're looking at, because we want to engage every ethno-cultural group here so that they can be involved. And we want to partner with the city, the volunteer section, so that we can actually see how we can even train some of those volunteers. And at the end of everything, we may probably ask the council to even maybe give certificate to them for their volunteer work they've done. So we're looking at actually engaging every community in Lloydminster to be part of it, part of the program or the festival.
Go off of those, that question Council President had. How many people do you expect totally that could take in this event over the weekend?
So when I estimate what we had this year in Edmonton with the Afro Festival that we organized, Edmonton is big, we had about 10,000 people attending 2 days of the festival. But here we're looking up to probably 7,000, because the plan of the publicity, we want to go vermilion around the area so that we can attract more people coming from the surrounding areas to Lloydminster. So we're looking at approximately 7,000 to 10,000.
Okay. And I guess the other question is, how many ethnic groups do you expect to partake? Because you're talking about an international flavor. So any idea of what the expectation?
So already we have 15 in our list that we have already spoken with. We are planning to have a session wherein we can advertise and invite all. So we're doing it in segments. We're inviting all those cultural communities who probably will be going up to 20. And the same thing we'll be doing with artists. We'll be having a special day to invite all artists, local artists here, so that we can have kind of auditioning and then have the artists that will be performing or presenting during the festival.
Councilor Buckingham.
Thank you, Worship. Thanks for the presentation. I was thinking about it, and then you said it, so I'm going to bring it up now. We're looking at marketing to the whole area, and we're bringing people in from all over the places. Basically, what you said, expecting a 7,000 turnout, when Edmonton had a 10,000 turnout. That's what we're looking for?
Yes, I am. We are looking to. We don't know how much it's going to be, but we are estimating about 7,000 that we can draw from within and the surrounding area. It might go beyond that, but we intend to actually do publicity in all the surrounding areas so that we can bring them. And even because we're looking at actually having 1 or 2 artists from outside coming to Lloydminster to actually perform with our local artists. So in that case, we might be bringing some people or some vendors coming from some other areas.
Although I can appreciate the fact that you honed this right in for us, for your specific request of council. What I'd like to have seen is more of a big picture of the total amount of expense and costs and so on and so forth you're going to have with this, to see that if this council decided to go forward with this, what piece of that pie it actually is in a comparatively speaking piece. Because if the marketing, the promotion, the volunteers coming up, everything isn't in line, it doesn't come forward properly, what have we given?
Thanks for that. We are estimating around 170,000 with all the grants that we'll be having. All that will be invested in this festival here. So that will be the overall, taking in consideration the other grants, and that will be applying for us about 170,000, 180,000. So that will be something that people will be able to use here, and then actually we'll be investing some of those and paying some of this to the local artists, because one thing is that we have these local artists, they don't have the means, so we'll find out, because some of these grants do permit that, so that we can pay these local artists to actually go on stage and perform.
No, that's good information. I was just trying to get kind of a sense of the bigger picture of the whole thing.
Councillor Person.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just one more question kind of in the same area. So if 170,000 is the total amount that you potentially have to raise either through corporate sponsorship or through government grants, what happens with if you don't get all of it?
So,
because it seems like a lot of money riding on the possibility of whether or not you apply for a grant and then are actually given said grant.
So, this will determine, depending on how much grant we receive, will determine the size of, for example, the other artists that we'll be bringing from outside. That may limit that. But we want to focus more on local. So we're looking at, based on what we get, that's how we're going to tailor the artist and how the festival is going to go. And the other sources that we intend to probably look at, even taxing some of these vendors a little bit of money that can actually bring some income to support paying the artist that will be performing.
Thank you very much. Just my last question is just, have you considered whether or not trying to piggyback on other events that are already happening? Just because we've got, other events happening through the summer. I think there's Cultural Days is one of the events that happens within the city. We've got Canada Day, which you could be, you could be celebrating multiculturalism through Canada Day as well. So I'm just curious if you've approached anyone as far as joining in on some of those festivities and rather than reinventing the wheel, just adding a multicultural element to some of these other festivities that are already happening.
Yes, I was fortunate to be part of the multicultural showcase for the Canadian. My children were really happy because just moving from Edmonton to here, when this was the first time they celebrated Canada Day here, and they said this was the best Canada Day they've ever got. And that was in part was based on that. There's a difference with what the multicultural showcase does is only having multicultural communities in a particular location and then exchanging. So this one will include a parade. We'll be looking at having a parade. I don't know whether some of you have seen the Carry West or a festival in Edmonton that they have a parade first before and then ends at the parade grounds, wherein the festival grounds, wherein they'll have all these vendors and then other performances on stage. So it's a little bit different than what is usually being done with the multicultural showcase. So a little Canada Day is a special, unique day. We want to have something that people can look up to other than just Canada Day, July 1st.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Richter.
Thank you, Richard. Just a quick question, sir. It says non-profit here. Are you a non-profit? Are you registered in the provinces?
Yes, the International Festival, Administered is registered as a non-profit.
This is registered as a non-profit charity in the province of Alberta and the province of Saskatchewan?
It's only registered in the province of Alberta for now, but when we called the SAS lottery and they said that should be okay for now, but we intend to actually...
But you're not registered?
We're not registered yet in Saskatchewan. Yeah.
Good, thanks.
Only registered in Alberta for now.
Councillor Kachuk.
One last thing, I guess. Pardon me, as we're opening this up, we're finding out more and more information. And I feel somewhat at a loss because now I heard it's a much larger project with a larger scope, with larger dollars, and I wish that would have been at the front end of this. So we had an opportunity to see that and sort of get sort of full disclosure on it. I'm still kind of trying to mull in my head the $6,000 amount, which is the bulk of the dollars we would give as a supper. So that works out for 100 volunteers at $60 a person. So what will they get for $60 a person? Because that's a pretty healthy amount if you were to go to a restaurant or deal or activity.
Sometimes these volunteers, it's just a honorarium that is not paying, we're paying them. Other areas we could look at to actually complement that once we come to that part. So we're looking at, we're actually estimating $100 as a honorarium, but being part of the festival itself is fulfilling. It's not about the money, even for the organization. It's not about making the money. It's about actually what do we do to make Administered a viable, a vibrant community, and that's why we're doing that.
So you led me down another spot, I guess. If I can just, so I'm not sure whether it's an honorarium now or a meal now. Or so the meal is like the honorarium, or just to be clear, I'm sorry, I'm a little thick today.
Can you repeat the question?
So you mentioned that it was you've given an honorarium in the past. So the meal is going to be like an honorarium, or will they actually receive cash?
So it would be a honorarium, and then we'll be discussing with the volunteers. We'll be providing meals for them, okay, for sure, and which would be covered in some other areas as well.
But the $6,000 will cover honorariums in addition.
So we'll be covering what we'll be providing for meals to support the volunteer for the whole festival. It's mostly for the meal part, but we're looking for other areas to give them honorarium.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 4.4, the SPCA.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and Council.
Good afternoon.
My name is Cameron Anderson. I'm the President of the Board for the Administered District SPCA. We've had a big year this year. We've had a lot of changes within the staffing and within our operations. We've asked for substantially more money this year due to a shortfall with one of our large funders taking a different direction with their funding. They're taking that, putting it into a trust to build a shelter for the community. Is there any questions from the council?
Certainly, I guess I can kick it off. What I guess that it is a substantial difference from the past years. Have you got some other alternates that you've looked at as well for looking for funds?
Yes, we are. With the John Punchon leaving as the executive director, we're looking at restructuring our staff to lower our expenses, possibly looking at hiring a fundraising coordinator to help bring in more income, look at more grants, so on and so forth.
Councilor?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just curious, like, I don't want to get into the other fundraising issue of that other group where the funds were coming in, but at what point did, what year did that kind of start? Was it just within the last few years, or is it several years that was one of the major sources of funding?
It's been for the past 18 years they've been fundraising for us. This will be their 18th year, I guess. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Councilor?
Just, thanks, Your Worship. Just kind of a follow-up to what you had said. So with the vacancy in your ED position, you said you wanted to look at hiring a fundraising person within that. So I'm trying to get my head around, are you replacing the executive director plus looking at something like that? Are you reallocating funding from the salary of the executive director to a fundraising type position? And if so, who runs the shelter?
We'll be kind of dispersing the executive director position to some of the existing staff, and then hiring a fundraising person strictly for fundraising. The staff that is there is very strong. John's put a great crew together, and we feel very confident in their abilities to continue running the shelter as he's done.
Our operations say that John had put people in place to do the day-to-day operations, and he was more of a fundraiser?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. He did a lot of it, like he took care of making sure the bills were paid, communications and so on. Majority of his time was spent fundraising.
Councilor?
Thank you, Your Worship. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, I did a quick review of the 2017 financials, and there is $428,000 in investments, but if I'm not mistaken, most of that is endowment that cannot be touched with exception of a small portion of the interest.
Yes, you're correct. We plan on using the interest portion to help cover the shortfall.
Okay.
We can use it in absolute last resort. If we're about to close our doors, we can use that funds. But it's stipulated that we not to unless that is about to occur.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Councilor?
Thanks, Ken. Are there any other changes you anticipate going forward around the operations overall? Because I guess losing John, and you've already talked a bit about how you're going to restructure and reorganize, and so different revenues, municipalities on both sides, more funding, or what are some of those conversations?
John had started working to put a level playing field out there so that all municipalities pay the same rate, so that it'll be just it'll bring in more revenue. Plus, it makes it fair for everybody. The cost per animal is the same for everyone. We're looking at there's so many things that we're looking at to try and streamline operations. John was running a very tight ship. So the biggest thing is to try and lower expenses as much as we can, but also bring in more funding where we can.
Councilor?
Thank you, Your Worship. This will be incredibly difficult, I think, with being short of having your executive director, but do you know if you could get any kind of number or comparative number of the cost per care per animal that you guys treat in a year, so that we can kind of have an idea of whether or not, or so that you as a group can ensure that your cost to operate is in line with what it should be, so that your restructuring can get to a certain, I guess, reasonable point. And I'm not saying that it is unreasonable, I'm just saying that as one of the funders, taxpayers being one of the funders, we want to make sure that we're getting the right value, and this is an area where I would have absolutely no idea whether or not we're in the right ballpark or not. I understand it still is going to be likely cheaper than any kind of in-house option. I understand and agree with that, but at the same time, I want to make sure that the SPCA can continue to perform their mandate, because that's important to us as partners from the city. But the other side is I want to ensure that it's happening at an appropriate value as well.
Yes, John had done some research into that, and checking with other shelters to see what their operating budgets were. And we were actually right in line with per capita with other shelters. We do provide a higher service. Like every animal that comes into the shelter needs spayed or neutered with all its shots and everything, so they're all vaccinated, healthy animals. And a lot of shelters don't provide the full 100% spayed and neuter that we do. And that's a huge one. That's one of our bigger expenses is their spayed and neuter program. But I think it's one of our most important to help control the population. We've seen a decrease in our dog population, and that's directly correlates to our spayed and neuter program.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor.
So has the board adopted a new plan, and so that
We have
at
this
this point, or where you're at, so there's a record in your minutes saying, hey, here's our new strategy, here's our new plan, here's our new way of operating.
We're still working on that. It's very, very fresh that John is leaving.
Yeah.
So nothing is set in stone yet. Everybody's bringing some new ideas to the table to help alleviate this shortfall.
Councillor.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. The way we sit now, the way your numbers read today, it's a 94,000 plus hit.
Yes.
What about next year and next year and next year?
We're actually looking at we're working on some, become more sustainable as an organization on our own through community interaction, birthday parties, and other means to generate more revenue so that we can become more sustainable. It's a hard one to try and draw people in and try to make our costs per animal are approximately $700 per animal, depending on length of stay, some higher, some lower. We're looking at some other programs that cities like Calgary have implemented. John had started researching them, and we're looking at that's some substantial income right there with those.
Follow up with the mayor, which is this particular SPCA serves a large area.
Yes.
As far as way of Turtle Lake, believe it or not, because the animal control officer has said send them to Administered. How do you go about collecting from all these municipalities that use the SPCA in Lloyd that's funded by the city of Lloyd? How do they contribute, if they contribute at all?
They pay per animal. So every animal that they send to the shelter, there's a fee that they will be.
They pay, or are they individual?
The municipality does. So it comes in from whichever municipality, we invoice them per animal.
Do you have a financial statement that you send out to the city of Administered showing who paid what for what?
I'm not sure if we do. Since I didn't deal with that on a daily basis, I'm not sure if we have been or not. I'm sure it's something we can provide you with if you'd like.
I think that would be important.
Councillor Thorson, maybe.
Thank you. I was actually on the SPCA website today, and the 2017 report did show some numbers coming from County of Vermilion River, and it did show some coming from Britannia and some from Wilton, although from my assumption is that they weren't being recorded throughout the entire year, because the numbers from those three, other than the city of Lloyd, were very, very low. Like the fines and fees and number of animals. That's all included on the 2017 annual report, from what I saw.
Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, one thing more a comment than anything else, I guess, but so I'm sort of wondering how the day-to-day operations in the road, are we far, but I guess I'll leave it as a comment, and I'm not sure how the leadership will function. So if you have, as I'm hearing, someone who's a fundraiser and everybody else knows their job, at some point, there needs to be someone who's going to maintain the leadership within there, I guess. And that's kind of the question mark for me, is that we put these dollars in and then we're not sure who it is exactly that really is leading the organization. And I didn't get a really clear picture of that in your presentation.
Yes, we have our operations manager.
Okay.
And they'll be filling the executive director.
Okay.
The girl she's on mat leave at the present time, so there's an intern operations manager, but John spoke very highly of her and said that she can handle things very well.
As much for your information, Cam, if you're not aware of it, just the council members, the SPCA receives a $50,000 service fee from the farm, being our pound. The city does not operate a natural animal pound, so that's provided an annual grant. And I don't want to call it a grant, it's a service agreement in essence for the taxpayers pay for. Additionally, the SPCA collects the fees and fines for dog and cat licenses in the city. So, and that varies depending on how many people license their animals. So,
and that is something that we were working on as a plan to get more people to license their animals.
Okay. Oh, and to about 22,000, just over $22,000 last year, which is a good step in the right direction. Any other questions? Thanks very much, Cam.
Thank you for your
Appreciate
time.
it. Moving on to agenda item 4.5, Startup Administered.
So good afternoon, Your Worship and council members and city staff. I'm Tess Black, the Executive Director of Startup Administered. We saw many changes in 2018, including a rebrand to Startup Administered from the Regional Business Accelerator. This allowed us to join the Startup Canada Network, which is a national network for entrepreneurs. We transitioned executive directors. As well, we have many new board members as well as a new board chair this year. Although we've experienced many changes, our passion and commitment to growing businesses and supporting creative thinkers in the Lloydminster region stays the same. We work with entrepreneurs and innovative business owners to provide them with the tools they need to start, learn, grow, and thrive. We strongly believe in collaboration and fostering positive partnerships with similar organizations to ensure that we maximize the supports available in our community and in building our entrepreneurial ecosystem. We offer a variety of services and programming. Some highlights are our business planning preparation, business model canvas support, connections to mentors, coaches, and funding networks. Our partnership with Lakeland College and Alberta Innovates to establish the East Central Alberta Regional Innovation Network. The Dream Forest, our co-working space, incubation and acceleration space, various training and programming, among many others. We have seen significant growth in the past year. Compared to 2017, the first 10 months of 2018 have been off to a great start. We're looking forward to see how the full year will compare. So up to October 31st, 2018, over the entire year of 2017, we have seen a 40% increase in referrals, 104 referrals to local coaches and mentors, many of which will continue to work with these service providers in our community. 50 new Lloydminster clients, with over 70% of all our clients being based in Lloydminster. A 75% increase in client touchpoints. Today we're up over 2,300. 47% more walk-ins since the rebrand. 30% of our businesses served are existing businesses, with 70% being new businesses to our community. Over 358 hours of programming and services delivered to our community. This growth would have not been possible without the support of our funders, community partners, as well as the dedication of our team. This year's funding proposal was prepared prior to the City of Lloydminster Economic Development Strategic Plan being finalized. However, we do feel that Startup Lloydminster has a key role in supporting economic development within the City of Lloydminster. Through your support of Startup Lloyd, the City will be able to leverage their investment in supporting entrepreneurs and foster positive relationships, partnerships, and connections with local, provincial, and national entrepreneurial support organizations. Due to previous and ongoing support of Startup Lloydminster, the city has positioned Lloydminster as a world-class entrepreneurial business community that is ready for both internal and external investment. So some key statistics from the International Business Incubation Association regarding economic development investment into incubators. Every dollar in support equals $30 in local tax revenue. 84% of all incubator graduates stay in local communities, equaling long-term economic growth. Incubated companies have an 80% or higher 5-year survival rate, as opposed to 20% for non-incubated. So these just showcase the benefits of investing into incubators. Over the past 5 years, the City of Lloydminster has been a major supporter of Startup Lloydminster. Every year, Startup Lloydminster has expanded programming while maintaining a consistent funding ask, respectful of budgetary pressures. This year is no different. We're requesting $110,000 in funding support for 2019 from the City of Lloydminster. Within this ask is $20,000 of in-kind rent for our existing footprint within the Community Services Building. Going into this funding cycle, we are facing some major funding changes. One of our funding streams, the Alberta Entrepreneurship Incubator Program with Alberta Innovates, is coming to a close in March 2019, impacting our overall budget. We are actively looking to replace these dollars, however, at this time nothing has been secured. Funding from the City of Lloydminster will be directed to support essential services of Startup Lloydminster to ensure Lloydminster entrepreneurs continue to receive first-class service and supports. We also recognize the importance of fiscal accountability, and as such, we are prepared to supply the City of Lloydminster with progress metrics on a biannual basis, and we've outlined the metrics in our proposal. Another key area of focus is to survey past and present Startup Lloydminster clients to better quantify the impact of our organization in the community and for the clients we serve. I would like to thank you for your consideration of our request. We would not be able to support the business community without the support and championship of the City of Lloydminster. Thank you for entrusting us with this facet of community economic development. Our passionate community of entrepreneurs continue to grow and contribute to the economic, environmental, and social success of our region.
Questions? Councilor Dutcher.
Thanks, Des. So 104 referrals to local coaches and mentors. Can you just unpack that a bit for me? What does that look like? And is that a fee for service, or is that?
No, it's so our mentors are very gracious and they're very supportive of our organization. So they donate an hour of their time to meet with our entrepreneurs initially off the bat. And then following that, it's between the entrepreneur and the mentor for how that relationship and billing cycle follows. But they all contribute at least 1 hour free for service for our entrepreneurs.
And then the hours, 358 hours of programming and services delivered. Unpack that. Is that just consultation? Is that a fee for service in there?
Some of those are fee for service, like our leadership program and some of our other programming that we've charged for. Okay. But a lot of it is free programming and services. We have our super lunch and learns that are very popular and different programs like that.
So how much revenue do you generate here? Then is that revenue from that the leadership programming? Does that go back into general revenue or so?
Yeah.
Walk me through that. So
a portion of our budget is our revenues is derived from our programming revenue, so that's where some of that comes in and supports.
Tess, you mentioned in members here, basically 70% Lloydminster, 30% other. Where would that 30% consist of? How far out? Communities, in the rural?
Typically it's rural Alberta, kind of Vermilion, Cold Lake, Bonnyville, Wainwright. We don't have as many rural Saskatchewan, but that's, we're typically more Alberta.
Okay, that'll lead into my next question.
Yes.
As you stand here today, have you made submissions to the communities and municipalities outside the city?
So that is where our Alberta Innovates Regional Innovation Network funding comes in. That helps cover that support to those rural entrepreneurs.
So the province is only downloaded a portion of the cost to us.
Yes.
The whole thing. That's a change. Councillor Dorsey.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I just was, sorry, I wasn't texting anyone. I was pulling financials on my phone because I had saved them there earlier. So I was just curious, your grants that you receive from the federal and provincial governments, You probably generally have to spend all those grants in those years, otherwise you'd have to return them, correct?
Correct.
But there's probably one grant that you get that doesn't have that requirement. And right now, just looking at the financials, there is a $70,000 year-over-year surplus within the RBA. Some of which was going to marketing, and I understand likely a lot of that marketing dollars would have been spent in the current year when you had a changeover and things like that. And that was where some of the money was specifically directed to an individual program. But there's a portion of it where there's no specified use, it's just a building of cash. Is there any plans for any of those dollars for the current year that are sitting in the reserves?
For the current year or just the plan?
Just plan for the money in general that's in unrestricted reserves.
Yeah. So as you said, a portion of it is earmarked for our marketing, and we have tapped into that a bit more this year with our rebrand because we want to ensure that it's a strong rebrand. As well, a portion of it is earmarked for leasehold improvements and any capital expenditures that's required as necessary if a transition of space is arising.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good.
If I can just, what happens if Alberta Innovates does not renew their funding in April for you folks? What would the startup Lloyd look like at that point?
We would go through some major strategic planning and refocusing of what that looks like, and yeah.
How many staff are currently employed over at the office?
We currently have 4 of us.
Is that the entire complement? I know we've got mentors and that, but that's paid staff.
That's paid staff,
Paid staff.
as well as a bookkeeper on contract.
Councillor?
Just specific to that question, so on the Alberta Innovates one, is that only for one specific position, or is that just a general grant where other things go in?
This one, the regional innovation one, is more for a general, just to ensure that we're meeting their deliverables, so it doesn't need to be necessarily one person carrying out those activities, it can be a couple.
Okay. And I had one other question. And I told the mayor I had a steel trap and I didn't need to write it down, so it's going to come to me. Oh, just last year, there was a specific program, we'll say, that the money was going to. One was related to food or something along those lines, and there was another part of that program. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head.
Pop-up retail?
Yeah, pop-up retail. So then the proposition, the value proposition of the money in that year was to pay for this program.
Mm-hmm.
So then is there something specific for the $110,000 this year that is a program that this funds are being dedicated to?
So we're always looking at ways that we can expand our programming and provide the services and supports that our entrepreneurs are looking for. And over the past year, we've done some focus groups and really tried to reach out to our clients and potential clients to see what they're needing. So we're always looking at how we can start incorporating those. So there's not anything specific right now, but we're always looking to find the programming that's going to best serve the needs of the entrepreneur. So we want to be able to pivot as needed.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Baker?
Question gone through to Dan. Dan, did you provide a financial statement with the letter?
We gave a budgetary breakdown, but
No, financial statement.
not with that. No, but we can.
You have one?
Yeah, of course.
If you could make that available to the city clerk's office, that'd be good.
Yeah,
The other question is, some of the directors on here, I know a few of them,
yeah.
they're from Vermillion all over the place. What do these other communities contribute to this bottom line?
So we really try to recruit our board of directors to ensure that it's a wide range of business-minded individuals. And so just to make sure that we're well-rounded and once again meeting the needs of our entrepreneurs. So Caroline from Vermillion, her community economic development background is a strong asset to our board as that.
But cash, how much did you ask them for? Like, do they put anything up?
No, Vermillion does not.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, Jess.
Thank you.
Moving on to agenda item number 4.6, the Administered Public Library.
Good afternoon, Your Worship. Ron Gillings representing the library.
Good afternoon, Ron.
The information in our presentation, of course, has been distributed to you. What I'd like to do is just touch on a couple of themes. This year has been a positive year in a number of ways. The library board went through a strategic planning process. It developed a new strategic plan that came up with a vision to, amongst other things, serve the many communities within our community with a fairly audacious goal in the end of setting ourselves up in long term to be the most library using community in Lloydminster. When we look at our community itself, we've got about 13,000 active library users, and about 85% of those library users, or just over 11,500 of them, are actual residents of the city of Lloydminster. The two non-resident groups are approximately 800, and on one side, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and about 1,000 on the Saskatchewan side. So what do we do at the library? Well, besides the traditional things that libraries do, which is lending books, we also lend other materials. We have a solid and increasing growth of materials in the non-print area, and we expect by the end of this year that will be up something in the range of 20% over last year. And we have been for a number of years been providing electronic-based materials for people that they can download and use from home. Other things that we do, well, we've provided computer space for over 7,300 internet stations. We serve a fairly identifiable community of people who may have smartphones, but they don't have the money to pay for data plans and wireless connections, so they use our internet. As you can see, it's over 2,000 week-long Wi-Fi sessions provided. And we provided last year about 1,400 what we call one-on-one training sessions. And that's everything from teaching people what an email address is and how to sign up for one, to how to scan, complete, and return government reports or documents, apply for jobs, or a number of other things like that. We proctor post-secondary exams, and we offered last year over 113 programs with just over 2,000 attendees. We actually feel that we provide some real net value to the community, just looking at the things that were borrowed and looking at them by the unit price that we paid for, not the standard list price. Our normal loan numbers basically came back with just about $2.5 million in value provided to the community for the city's annual investment in the library. Our revenue for this year is up slightly because we were able to extend our memorandum of understanding with Lakeland Library Region. The cost went up, but since they give us 110% of what we send them back, we saw a minor increase there. Interest income has gone up slightly. If you take a look at our revenue, you'll see that despite all of this, the city is still the majority of our income, 2/3 or 66%. Expenditures, we have a 1% contractual increase due to QP in 2019. We've refined our costs on CPP and EI with some prodding from Councillor Torreson. We have power and telephone rates that we just cannot avoid. And we've reduced not only our capital, but a couple of other maintenance items so that we can stay within the numbers that we were using in 2017. Because we do recognize the economic situation, both the city and the community. And you'll see on the, if you put on the next slide, if you could please. Whoever has control. You can see that 42% of our costs are staff, and 20% of the costs are the annual levy to Lakeland Library Region. So again, that comes fairly close to 2/3 of our costs are tied up in a couple of fairly large items. So basically, our request is for a similar amount. We're looking forward, based on some of the development work we're doing in our plan, on our strategic plan, to coming back potentially to at least some additional space in the atrium center location, while we look at some of the other options, for example, the joint school possibility at the south end of the community, and to get an agreement on the capital funding for that, some of which we have sitting in our reserves and would be dedicating to the renovation, replacement of carpet, lighting, things like that, presuming we, as a part of that extension, stayed there for another 5 or 6 years. Beyond that, I will endeavor to answer any questions you may have, and I will find answers to questions that I'm unable to answer.
Thank you, Ron.
Tonight, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. Questions, Councillor Thorson?
Just wanted to start with a comment on part of this, and that's when we look at the Lakeland Library contribution, because really, so that all members of the council and the public understand, we write them a $296,000 check, or that's what the expectation is for this year, and we get $326,000. So if you net those two, we get $29,000, which if you take the total revenue of that amount, that works out to 2.8% of the overall budget. Whereas we looked up there at the top and we saw what the proportion of rural was for the overall use, and it's closer to 9% or 8%, whatever it was. Just so everyone understands that portion, if it says 326,000 of the total revenue, well, it's really only a small fraction of that is actually revenue, because it comes with a very high cost.
And it is a mandatory levy on municipality under the Saskatchewan legislation.
Unless you have your own municipal library, correct?
Yes.
Councillor Baker?
Thank you to Manager Ron. Just to help me clarify something, I should know the answer. Library systems membership, $296,000. Library services, $52,000. What's the difference?
The library system member is simply the levy we pay to the regional library. They, and that's a mandatory levy that they pay. The library services are items within our budget that are, let's see, I'll just bring up the detail on my copy. So
You told me this before,
Sorry?
You told me this before.
Yeah. The library services and other are everything from copyright licenses, technology maintenance, our programming costs for programs we run for kids, memberships, things like that. Reasonably discretionary items that we still would hurt if we weren't spending. But it's just simply a
I
description.
don't know how they separate it, but I guess they do. The $296,000 we pay to what, Lakeland?
Lakeland.
Tell us what's that about again.
That is the mandatory requisition fee rate set by the regional library based on our Saskatchewan population of the last federal census. They set a rate for the three cities of approximately $25, $26 per capita times the population on the Saskatchewan side, and we send them a check in that amount.
So we're charged that by the Saskatchewan government?
Well, in fact, it's enforced by the Saskatchewan government, but we pay it to the regional library North Battleford.
Same thing.
Same thing, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
But we do get it and 10% more back.
Yeah. We pay them $10, they give us back 11. That's the way it works.
So Ron, some of your numbers, I just wanted to dive into them a little bit, all the services that you were discussing, because I find them very interesting. 7,300 internet sessions. What defines an internet session?
That is someone sitting down and using between an hour and 90 minutes of internet time at some point over the course of over the 12 months of the year.
Okay. 2,007-day Wi-Fi session.
Same thing, someone coming in, acquiring a Wi-Fi pass and using it for some or all of the week. The average time they use it is about 4 days.
4 days a week, okay. The one-on-one sessions, the training sessions you offer, that would be, I imagine, for everything from children to senior citizens potentially, or can you break that out?
It's more so showing people, the majority of them would be showing people how to use the technology.
So I know that we have the Learning Council. You had a chance to partner or look at anything from the Learning Council from that perspective in the past or going forward?
When people's needs reach a point of either complexity or frequency, we refer them most happily to both the Learning Council and to the college. These are one-off, they come in. Our least favorite one is a couple of people come in, our grandchildren gave us this email thing. We're supposed to be able to use it and download and see our grandkids' pictures. How do we use it? And the first question is, well, what email service? There's more than one. And it goes from that to actually helping people fill out and complete applications for permanent residency, usually evenings and Saturdays. It's almost all online.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense for sure. The 140 post-secondary exams that are proctored, is that an ability for the library to get some revenue recaptured? Like simply, if you're proctoring, you're taking staff time that would be in the library, and I just wondered if there's an opportunity to recover any costs there.
We've looked at it from the point of view that at this point, the issue is more they're coming in, they need to use the internet, and they want someone to watch and verify it that they didn't do something forbidden. We put them in a room that's sanitized. We watch through the glass periodically when they're done.
Okay.
So it isn't as, but it's developing. The other one associated with it we've not been tracking, but we're starting to, are the people coming in and doing the mandatory site training for certain oil companies in town where to gain access. Usually they're coming in after 4:30, after an office is closed. They need to complete this so that they can go to work the next morning at 7 a.m. So we have several stations that we simply point them to, set them up at us, and when they print their certificate off, we charge them for printing the certificate.
Okay. Lastly, the 113 programs split between child and adult. Can you give us some idea of that?
They're primarily children's programs at this point. Our staffing is not quite able to stretch to having 2 people on in that area at all times. So we aim for the priority is children's stuff and on Saturdays. And it's more and more heading in the direction of STEM, science, technology, education stuff. One of the more popular ones was a week-long session in July involving LEGO. We were pleased but terrified by the response.
Is that a summer program?
That was one of the summer programs we did, yeah.
Do we offer, or is there a charge for that through the
No.
library? So we're offering some free.
We have debated the charge issue. It's dubious as to whether we can get away with it under provincial legislation. And our motivation on this is to maintain children reading or get them reading. One of the best indicators of future performance in school and life is starting reading early. The earlier the better, and maintaining it. So we view it as a bit of an investment on behalf of not just schools, but our community in general.
I got one more and then I'll turn it over. So I know you've touched on it already. We saw the expenses, we saw the funding options. Certainly, has the library reached out to the adjoining municipalities? Because as I think it was alluded to earlier, the cost breakdown, we're 6% of the makeup of the library, but we're funding a much larger portion proportionately. I'm just wondering if our neighbors, if you've had the opportunity to present this to them.
The argument has been suggested on the Saskatchewan side that the 10% we get back over the levy we send them basically compensates for the service we provide to people on the Saskatchewan rural area. And per capita dollar way, it's in that $25 per capita range, which is similar to the city's contribution. The money from the other side, the County of Vermilion River, contributes a single ex gratia payment of $1,500 that is nowhere near that, but as we are subject to a cross-border agreement that runs from Provost all the way up to Cold Lake and beyond that allows reciprocal use of the libraries across the border, we have no real leg to stand on it. Participation or involvement by council would be appropriate.
Thank you. Councilor Thorson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to highlight something within this, and that's last year, council really squeezed the library, I would say, to bring down their ask to reflect some of the practices in the past, regardless of whether the direction was received to do that or not. In my opinion, this the ask this year being closer to prior years or at prior years is more appropriate than not. My only question is, Ron, have you looked at your 2017 actuals, and was there enough anomalies in that to not make the assumption that a number similar to that could be your budget for the current year? Just because the 2017 actual, because you have the 2017 budget is what you were asking for, the 2017 actuals were $50,000 less than what you're putting in your budget for the current year.
Yes, we did look at that. That was significantly a result of staff absences. We have reworked our staffing for the current year, and in addition to drawing the funds that were squeezed out of our unspecified reserves, we're on track to be using about $165,000 to $170,000 of those reserves by end of calendar year. When we look at the actuals, and they are very close to the last 2 years, we're about on $450,000, we're about $2,000 out. So we're far closer than we were, and we've been able to manage the unexpected staff absences. We had a little bit more depth, and we're able to deal with it rather than just not having people.
Okay. One other question I had is just around, you mentioned within this some plans of possibly expanding your use of the facilities, talking to Service Credit Union and expanding within the Atrium Center. That's in future years? That's not this current year?
That's not this year. We would look at potentially looking at that for 20 and 20, starting in 20, fully annualizing it in 21, presuming that we stay in the current location. And some of that's going to require the final income input from the downtown revitalization project. The comments that I saw when I completed my own indicated people saw us as a useful part of downtown, and I'm not quite sure what the final numbers on that end up as, and we'll see where it goes from there.
Okay.
But I don't see any major change in location beyond where we're at the moment.
Yeah, thank you for your responses. The one other thing I just wanted, I have a little more knowledge on this, so I'm trying to draw it out a little bit. As far as our options with the other governments, because it's not mentioned within our charter, from your understanding, we just have to follow whatever legislation is in place because it's not mentioned by the charter, so we would have to open up the charter and establish which municipal government act we follow, or library act we followed to be able to deal with some of these misallocations, some of the differences in funds from one side to the other and try and find the right deal.
There has been a pattern now set by the City of Prince Albert. It took them about 2.5 years to sever their membership in the Wapiti Regional Library. They're now counted as the third of the 3 municipal libraries in the province of Saskatchewan, the other 2 being Regina and Saskatoon. The government of Saskatchewan is also doing some fairly quiet, almost under the radar panel meetings with the regional library boards to determine what the future of the legislation should be. And I know that both from our point of view, and I suspect from the other larger municipal sized library in the province, which is Moose Jaw, that this is an area of interest. Should we be locked into an arrangement where 75 small municipalities can outvote us routinely on a 1 vote per municipality basis at regional meetings, or should the 5 larger communities sit there as municipal libraries and work with their colleagues, but be able to have a little bit better and a little bit more formal understanding with them. And that's, again, something that we know the province is working on something from the questions that they've been asking, but we're not quite sure where they're heading.
Thank you.
One last question that I have, and then The library's looking at a library delivery vehicle. I think that's a great idea, but I would ask, have you looked at the other business case of a contractor? Because once you put a vehicle on the road, it immediately depreciates. You've got gas, oil, licensing, insurance, the list just goes on versus with the idea, because I understand why you want to do it. There's people.
We are currently using a contractor to do the two deliveries twice a month to the existing facilities of material. That's running us close to $4,000 a year already if we extend it, or if we greatly extend the home-based delivery network that we're looking at, in particular seniors who are weather-bound due to ice and snow and things like that. Then there will be a tipping point sometime in the next year or so where, when we look at the numbers, it will start to become advantageous for us to do it ourselves rather than to contract it out.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, Tom.
Thank you.
Moving to agenda item 4.7, Vic Juba Community Theatre.
Good afternoon, Your Worship, council members, senior staff. My name is Kevin Kraft. I'm the general manager of Vic Juba Community Theatre. I'm joined today by Jackie Fowler, who's our chair board. She may have to leave before you're finished asking questions. We're in our 16th year of operation, as busy as we have ever been. I think getting more and more successful in providing the entertainment that the city is looking for, while giving a place for the community to celebrate its own arts and performers. And I really don't have much else to say, but I'm certainly happy to take all your questions.
Kevin, if
Is that way? Turn on? I don't know.
Yeah, there it is, yeah. Kevin, if I could ask the question, how many event days do you operate the theater? I know we have 365 days in a year. How many event days are we currently at?
I think this year we're on track to hit 197, which is made a little bit more spectacular by the fact that we don't host events in July or August, and that we're closed for a couple of weeks during Christmas too.
Okay.
Very busy building.
Councilor Dorsey.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I did the same activity for the Vic Juba I did for all of our third parties were available and reviewed financials and things like that from the prior year. And I agree with the sentiment that you run a tight ship.
I appreciate that.
And yeah, it's the ask as far as I can see is really not, you know, with comparison to the other groups, I think it's, you know, on the reasonable side and everything, although we're all looking for whatever we can to, you know, save where we can. But seeing even some year-to-date numbers that one of the councilors shared with me, it looks as though you're really trying to increase your functions this year. So revenues are up big time, but associated expenses are up as well. But it's not, you're not carrying over a whole bunch of funds, like you're not trying to, there's no major capital needs because it's not part of your normal request, right? Because I think the city pays for some of the capital generally.
Actually, the Administered Regional Theater Foundation has been the source of most of that.
So either way, on the operating side, it looks like everything is kind of business as usual, and you know, regardless of the increase of events and event dollar values, everything looks the same. So yeah, I just thought that overall a good presentation, although it looked awfully similar to the one we've seen in the past, but I guess if it's not broke, don't fix it.
I'll put together a musical number for next year. Two bright points of light as far as taxpayers and their commitment to the theater. I think we can count. I think I'm counting, and I think the board is counting on some serious support coming from funding that comes from the casino that we're about to adopt into the city. And I hope to be able to report at this time next year that we have a new formal agreement with Lakeland College as far as some funding. At this point, I can't do that, but moving forward, as I say, I see our next years as being, I think, less dependent on tax dollars and more dependent or on our revenue coming from different partners and from gambling money.
Any other comments or questions?
I'm just going to add that it's kind of a, pardon me, a bit of a thankless job listening to all of these proposals because you're going, oh God, where do you find all the money? And yet when you look at the list of all the organizations and look at the contribute to the city, we have everything from the arts to the SPCA to the archives to the library. And I think we're very fortunate to have all these pieces and have the task of going through this today. So it's good to see that the organization is doing well and good on you. Congratulations.
Thanks very much, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Kevin. I think no other questions? You're good to go. Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 4.8. I'll ask residents in recovery.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and Councilman. My name is Todd Lorenz, and I'm the Program Director for Residents in Recovery Society. We're a new nonprofit in Lloydminster here that provides daily programming as well as sober living for individuals struggling with addictions. As many of you know, in the Lloydminster Needs Survey that was conducted last year, addictions really is on the top of the minds of many Lloydminster residents. So I think it indicated that 57% of people that completed that survey indicated that addiction needs to be a top priority. Following that, we came up with a program with the help of a number of the organizations that presented here today and a number of other individuals in the community to come up with a program that really supports individuals struggling with marginalization and in particular addiction. My ask today is in with regards to strictly our addiction programming. We do have life skills programming in the morning, which we've applied for funding and alternate sources for that, as well as our sober living program, which is virtually self-sustaining itself. So our ask is primarily focused on just providing addiction programming in the afternoon for individuals in Lloydminster. Our addiction programming is open and free to the public for anybody struggling with addiction, and it provides them an opportunity to learn more about addiction, ways to cope and deal with their addiction issues, as well as the outreach component of our programming allows us to help them navigate, help their families navigate, to get support, get them into treatment, get them into detox. To date, we've only been operating for 2 months now. To date, we have sent 14 individuals to either treatment or detox. We've had 2 individuals deal with their outstanding warrants and issues with criminal activity in Lloydminster. So we've got them started on their recovery journey. One of them is out, and one of them is currently incarcerated in remand. As well, we help individuals that are coming out of detox and remand reintegrate back into the community by providing them support, while they await residential treatment in a treatment facility, whether it be at the Port or other places in Alberta or Saskatchewan. So our program really does offer individuals the opportunity to build on their recovery. It offers a distraction for them, gives them something to do during the day, rather than trying to struggle with their addiction, in whatever, in most cases, unhealthy environment that they're quite typical to. We currently have anywhere from 12 to 16 individuals taking part in our addiction programming every day. That being said, we really are limited in space to what we can provide right now, so we haven't aggressively looked to expand that until we complete renovations in the back and have a larger space to be able to provide programming for up to 30 individuals, which I feel it is very, very easy to accomplish. So We have a number of partnerships with community organizations. We get a number of referrals from both Alberta and Saskatchewan probations, both Alberta Works and South Social Services, mental health and addictions, Midwest Family Connections, Integral Home. I met this morning with the Sexual Assault Center. So we have a number of community organizations that we work with and try and, the Young is one of the other ones, try and provide programming for their individual, their people in their participants in their programs that struggle with addiction, which really isn't what they focus on. So the $40,000 I'm asking for is really what it costs us to run this program for the year. I think it's a quite reasonable number for a program like this, operating every week or 2. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tyler. Questions? Councilor Buckingham.
Thank you, Worship. Thanks for the presentation, Tyler.
Yeah.
I was looking at the revenue expenses sheet that you guys provided for us. I mean, basically, if this is bang on, what you're asking us is to cover a deficit of $40,000 this year. You're not going to be looking to even break even. Like as it sits right now, you're looking at a $40,000 deficit. That doesn't incorporate any of the rentals or anything that you were talking about doing in your presentation as well. Correct. So there's some lofty numbers in here. I'm guessing the $40,000. Well, I know $40,000 in sponsors and donors we have on the top part of the grants, fundraising, donations page. How much of that is secured 100%?
To date, we've operated completely 100% on donations. We have donations in place to take us into January. So we will basically operate for 4.5 months, 100% on donations. So there is a really strong community support for our program. I mean, it would be nice to think that it is sustainable, and I think some of that is. I think we can generate a lot of donations going forward, which will be required if we don't get this funding. I know for a fact we're not going to get all of our life skills program funding, so we will have to generate a lot of revenue through fundraising. We do have an individual that actually submitted this application that is doing grant writing for us. Being as we're new, we're really opening, looking at different areas that we can access funding. I'm not a grant writer myself, so this is why we had Brenda step in and take this over. This isn't. I personally don't even have time to do it. Really, we only have 2 staff at the center, and we've actually helped over 43 different individuals and their families with navigating their addiction issues. So, we're very busy down there, and then when I'm doing programming, it really is something that I don't really have time for still. But going forward, we do have good commitment from our board to do a lot of fundraising. What that looks like, I can't really say. So,
yeah, it's a tough thing to start off something like this. It's almost unfathomable to those who haven't tried. It's an enviable thing that you're working on. I have a couple of questions going forward. One of those is, what happens when those donations don't come forward? You guys are going to be forced to shut your doors. Is that fair?
I wouldn't. I mean, I guess if all donations dry up and we aren't successful in receiving any municipal funding, provincial funding, or grants, then I guess that would be the case. Currently, as it sits, I've been doing this now for 2 months without being paid. So, I mean, it's a situation that I'm very passionate about this. I think as long as there's a way that we can keep our overhead expenses covered short of my salary, the doors will remain open and will continue to serve those people.
Well, very good. It's, like I say, I'm not discounting the fact that you're doing a great thing by any chance, so please don't take it that way. Of the people you've helped, we keep asking the same questions of a lot of these groups. How many of those people are in the city? How many of those people?
They're all of them in the city. I think we had 2 from Marwayne, but the rest of them are from the ministry.
No, I think, and then the last thing I'll just add to that, if I can, is, you know, at what point, how do I say this? There's lots of things that we need to look at, and we've looked at today all the way through the course of the day. At what point are taxpayers subsidizing this kind of a program? You know, it's a tough one for me to struggle with, for sure. So, as I say, not to discount what you're doing at all, but there's a lot of asks here today. So.
I think, you know, in response to that, I think many people discredit the fact of how much addiction really affects them. You know, with crime levels, you know, being on the top of minds of individuals in Administered, seeing individuals, you know, intoxicated walking around downtown, it affects, you know, organizations like Ron and the library. Getting these individuals the help and support they need, you know, ultimately reduces crime rates, ultimately makes for a healthier community. It ultimately reduces the strain on, you know, some other community programs as well, by having individuals, you know, healthy. And also, you know, getting these people out of their active addiction, which costs, you know, our health system, you know, all these other things, and back working in our community, you know, ultimately results in them paying taxes.
No, the social aspects are far-reaching, so I appreciate the response. That's good information for anybody that may not think about it all the way around it. So thank you.
Councilor Torres.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just on the grant side, I was just curious what's been applied for from provincial governments and any kind of, or federal governments, any kind of expectations, anything like that that you have. Just because in my mind, this is a provincial issue, but at the same time, we've established that this is a priority through some of the work we've done related to mental health and through some of the surveys and kind of the commitments we've made overall. And I agree with you on the policing side. I could see some value there. The only reservation I would have is whether or not we are self-imposing downloading from provincial government. So basically saying to provinces, yeah, don't bother funding these things that really are within your wheelhouse because we'll take care of it. So I'm just curious, what do those dollar figures look like on your side as to what's been applied for and any kind of expectations of what could be there? Because I'd rather be a partner of the provinces on these things than to be the sole provider of the services.
No, I appreciate that. We've worked quite diligently with both Colleen Young and Dr. Starkey on trying to access, you know, specifically provincial funding through health. Because we're not a treatment facility, because we're providing, you know, outreach support and sober living, we've been bounced around quite a bit from department to department. You know, health says, well, no, this is more of a community social issue. So then we go to Administered Economies. They say, well, no, this is more of a health issue. And then we get bounced back and forth. We do have in the works potential funding from Administered Economies for our life skills programming. What that amount is, we originally started talking about $10,000 every 3 months, which was a program they had. That has not been approved yet. As far as any health funding, addiction-related health funding, we haven't been successful with either province in getting them to commit to anything there. We kind of fall in a gap in the whole thing because we're not really providing addiction treatment. So it's not really a health issue as much as, you know, it might seem on the surface.
Okay.
We have had, we got our startup capital from the Administered Region Health Foundation through Project Sunrise, and I mean, they've been a big supporter of our program. and I'm sure will be, going forward as well. So, we do have that source, potential source as well if we aren't able to access funds anywhere else.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor.
Thank you. Thank you very much for being here today and telling us your story. I've been asked this question. What's the difference between the Thorpe Center and I'm sure you've been asked that question.
Many times,
Yeah.
many times. We really do work closely with Thorpe. A number of the individuals that we've had come into our program, Faye has got into detox, same day for us. So, we work in close collaboration with the Thorpe Center. I'm out there every week on other things. So, I do have a strong relationship with them. Susie LeBrock, that used to be the director up there, actually helped me put together the business plan for this. So the main difference is that Thorpe provides the detox and the treatment aspect. We provide everything in between and after. So to get a continuum of care for addictions is what really lends to overall success of a recovery program. You can't just rely on somebody going to detox, waiting, reintegrated back to the community, waiting 2 months, 3 months, their week is 10 weeks right now. Wait 10 weeks, go into treatment, and then go back into the community and think that you're going to be, cured of addiction. It doesn't work like that. What we see more often than not is we send individuals to detox. They get out of detox, within a week they're using again. Many of them don't even get a treatment date within that time because they don't make their appointments or can't get into mental health and addiction for 3 or 4 weeks or whatever the case may be. So many of them don't even get a treatment bed. So then, 4, 5, 6 months down the road, we send them detox again, do this whole thing all over again. And eventually, maybe sometime at some point, we get them a treatment bed that's 8 weeks down the road. 7 days before they go to treatment because they've been out actively using again, we send them to detox and then directly to treatment. It really is an extremely inefficient system. There is no continuum of care for addiction support like you would see in other health issues. So, our program fills those gaps, gives them the support they need and the coping mechanisms, the tools they need, after detox, after remand, whatever it is, and then support and navigational help to get into treatment. So we fill that gap, and then once they come out of treatment, we provide them, support for up to a year, help them to reintegrate, utilize the tools that they learned in treatment, and help them reintegrate back into the community. So we are just providing things that aren't already available there.
Just to follow up on that. One time in the city, somebody said we might fail. And it was called the Administered Health Foundation, a long time ago. It didn't fail.
No, it didn't.
But what it did do is took responsibility for something that was perceived to be someone else's responsibility. But half the time, the city found there was gaps in the system, and they wanted to get the service that they believed that the people in this region deserve. So what you have in the Health Foundation today. It's quite a thing when you look back and see how it's developed. I know a little bit about what you're doing because His Worship invited me to your summer picnic, get together at the park.
Yeah.
And it was quite a day, I must say. And I guess there was 300 or 400 people there. So somebody looking for something. That much I know. But I think just a little bit of help, and I'm sure everybody's giving you lots of advice. I'm just saying, I hope you've talked to the Health Foundation.
Yes, they provided our startup costs. We had initially talked about waiting till we got some municipal or government funding to start, in which case we wouldn't have been able to start it in September because we had really nothing in place. And most of the funding year starts in 2019. Because of the huge demand in our community for what we were doing, the Health Foundation, through Project Sunrise, provided us the money to get going to start up, has been a huge supporter with donations. Some of their major contributors they've sent our way as well. Like Richard Plainer, has supported our program as well. And that is really in large part due to the extreme need that we have in our community for programming like this. I'm also on the steering committee for Project Sunrise, so I have a nice voice there every month. So on that committee, so yeah, I mean, without their support, we definitely wouldn't be here today.
I think that's important because if anybody knows the health system and how to deal with it, I'm sure it's the Health Foundation. So good for you for following up on that. Thank you, Your Worship, and to yourself for your time.
Thank you.
Councilor Person.
Thank you, Your Worship. I hope I'm not stepping out of line when I say this, but just looking at the overall expenses, a handful of these things, not all of them, could be regarded as administrative in nature, and obviously important things that have to happen, but have you considered combining administrative forces with other groups that are doing other kind of outreach type services that maybe you could get some synergy between them? I know I believe you were involved with the men's shelter at one point, personally, but I just wonder if there's some synergy between those two groups. And my thoughts are, it's difficult when you have several not-for-profits sometimes, all chasing after the same ball. And I understand that some of the goals are different and some of the services provided by that facility are different. But I just wonder on an administrative side whether or not it makes sense to combine forces administratively so you can provide more services for less dollar.
I guess perhaps there's maybe a little bit of misunderstanding. The Administered Men's Shelter doesn't provide any community programming services at all. So, and a good third of our participants actually are current residents of the men's shelter. So it's not like we're stepping on their toes or could even ask. They're not providing that level of service in any respect at this time. So, asking them to contribute, in any way to services that they're not providing or mandated to provide, wouldn't probably work. When it comes to other organizations, like the Interval Home, like Libby Young, like Midwest Family Connections, we're providing programming that they are not providing, and providing programming to their segment of their population or their participants that aren't getting addiction programming because they don't really deal with individuals struggling with addictions. Libby Young's life skill programming is strictly for those struggling with mental health issues. The second that there's addiction issues there, they have in the past just been kicked out of the Libby Young program. Now there's this opportunity for us to help support their current participants with addiction programming rather than kick them out of the Libby Young program. So they actually bring those struggling with addictions to us to provide them that programming piece that they never got before.
Okay, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Kyle, if I can close off with any other comments? Questions?
Yeah, it's a great program. I'm familiar with it, Tyler. You and I have talked lots, and I give you full credit for stepping out and taking this leap of faith out there. What I was really surprised was we sat together at Women a few weeks ago, and you were successful at retaining those dollars from the 100 women. And the amount of people that were coming up to you and congratulating you, I was very impressed with the coverage that you're getting, the traction that you're getting for just being around for a short while. Mind you, you're kind of a hometown boy, born and raised here, so that gives you a little advantage here. So, yeah, it's very unique. It's a great program, and definitely when we take a look on the social side of things, it's well needed, and hopefully we can can make this thing work and can help out those in the community that really need this addictions act.
Yes, Tyler, you kind of we've been around, so you have some other applications out, you're working, it's still
Yes, we
pursuing
do.
the government, you're pursuing the government. The one recommendation, based on what you said, between economy and health, maybe it's time to turn to human resources or human services in Alberta. I'm not sure the equivalent is Saskatchewan. It is, you're welcome to our avenue, trying to find a wastewater treatment plant, and you've got a much smaller ask, so from that perspective, is there any other organizations locally, have you applied locally? Council Fagan just alluded to 100 Women. There's other charitable organizations that we've been reaching out past the Health Foundation.
Right now, we don't have any, well, actually, I shouldn't say that. Brenda's been quite active in submitting applications, not necessarily for operational funding, more for, add-on services that we can provide. I know she has an application out there for us to maybe put together some gym equipment for the guys, some recreational programming funding to support the guys in the summer living program, on weekends or other community engagement activities. But for operational funding, we do have an application with the FCSS for our life skills programming, and then the life skills programming as well for with Minister Economies in Saskatchewan. Yeah.
Sure.
But that's the only ones I'm saying.
So appreciate that.
Yeah.
And that's a whole, that's grant programming is also part of it, so
Yeah.
it sounds like you've got some good hands there.
Great.
Councilor Dutcher.
One quick question. What portion of the folks that you have that providing services for would have mental health issues? Percentage-wise? Half, 2/3?
I would say almost 70%.
Okay.
And not saying that addiction is not a mental health issue, which, realistically, it's,
Because I'm part of this regional health piece that I'm working on through the college.
Yeah.
And I wrote your information down and see if there's a way we can help you out.
For sure. Awesome. Thank you.
Any other questions? Not seeing any, Tyler. Thank you very much for being patient, for being the last presenter. It's always a tough one. I'd look to council for maybe approval to recess or a motion to recess to 5.
Motion to recess for 5.
Councilor Dutcher, seconded by Councilor Fagan. All in favor? Carried.
We're not coming back.
Thank you, everyone. I'll ask for motion to come back into session.
Motion to return back to session.
Councillor Diachuk, seconded by Councillor Buckingham. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, council, administration, and guests for putting through this day. This is a long day, but it's part of the budget process. Before we move on to item number 5.1, the administration report, I'd ask council to allow our Chief Financial Officer to give her entire presentation, if you wouldn't mind, and then bring questions up at the end, because I think what will happen is potentially we'll have questions come up that she may be able to answer in her presentation, or secondly, that we may not get to that end of that presentation. So I'd really like to give her the opportunity, if council would be so agreeable. So if you have questions, please note them, and as we move through it, we'll, once we're done, I'm sure she'll be more than glad to entertain those questions. So with that, City Manager, through the Chief Financial Officer.
Your Worship, Council, for your consideration, administration has put together the first draft of the 2019 budget. This document was prepared through the diligent cooperation of all of our municipal departments and takes into consideration the guidance of our residents from the public engagement sessions. Administration has endeavored to align this budget with Council's strategic direction, leveraging federal and municipal funding to support critical infrastructure, attract investment, spur local economy. We sought to maintain or enhance current service levels, keeping in mind the costs. Lloydminster is home to a youthful, active, diverse population that holds its municipal leaders to a high level of accountability and fiscal transparency. The 2018 public engagement was clear in their expectations for our municipality to provide services and amenities at the best possible value, resulting in building a better Lloydminster for our current and future residents. The 2019 budget takes into consideration Council's 2017 to 2021 strategic plan. The timeline for the budget process started in June with departments taking a preliminary look at their costs. July and August, departments reviewed their business plans. August and September, community engagement occurred, and in October, departments presented to the executive leadership team. That brings us to today, as we present to you the first draft. These are our guiding principles in preparing the draft budget. Deliver a balanced budget. We are required by legislation to have a positive, balanced budget, excluding amortization, of course. Maintain or enhance our service levels. Ensure we have lean and effective operations with regard to costs, and try to enhance reserves and capital replacement plans. Align with the strategic plan of Council. The community engagement, collecting residents' input for the 2019 budget priorities. Activities included July 12th pancake breakfast and the jelly bean survey. August 20th to September 14th, there was an online survey. And September 5th and 6th, Your Voice open house events. We collected residents' input on the 2019 budget priorities, and there was 507 completed surveys submitted, 220 comments shared, 115 plus face-to-face conversations with council and administration. In the community engagement, the residents shared ideas, wants, and expectations, and it consistently identified in order of priority the street maintenance, taxes and financial use, recreation and culture, traffic, protective services, and community safety. Challenges and opportunities in 2019. As council saw in the third quarter financials, the current resident reserves balance is 22.3 million, which is higher than the 21.6 million balance at year-end December 31st, 17. Though it has increased slightly, considering the fixed assets values are totaling 480 million, we know that we need to be diligent about working to increase those funds. As with any municipal government, there is limited cost sharing with the federal and provincial levels. This leaves the city with few options to offset increased costs. With regard to infrastructure deficit, in 2019, we'll be commencing the beginning of a multi-year asset management strategy to get a true picture of the city's infrastructure deficit. Through asset assessment growth, though assessment growth is very minimal at less than 1%, it has been included in our projections. The wastewater treatment plant was carried forward from 2018. This hoped that we would have 1/3 federal grant, 1/3 provincial grant, 1/3 municipal grant funding for this project, and it will be at least a 3-year project from commencement of construction to completion. 2019 will be the first phase of this project, and it has 9 million in the budget for 2019 and projecting approximately 80 million for the total construction cost. Winter road maintenance. Council and administration have heard residents' wishes for enhanced winter road maintenance and are exploring strategies to provide improved service value in that area. Public safety. The city anticipates significant cost increases to support the fire services requirement of the future. Challenges and opportunities continue with our relationships, being our opportunities area. Continue to actively pursue opportunities to establish and build good relationships with a number of our key stakeholders, including our ratepayers, community builders, federal government, provincial government, regional municipal partners, Indigenous communities and leadership, local businesses, internal client relationships, including 2 separate collective agreements, Lakeland College and our school divisions. That leads us into our operating budget. So just looking at the operating highlights, which we'll get into the operating details after our highlights. Administration is proposing a 2.7% increase in the tax rate over 2018 tax rate. This will take into consideration that the downtown bid tax levy will be removed, a $145,000 reduction. The Lloyd Golf and Country Club will be moved in-house to gain cost efficiencies. This budget includes inflationary costs to all departments, and note we are currently in salary negotiations with the unions. We have included a new organizational model for the fire department, costing approximately 1.1 million increase. Transportation is increased to include 1 full snow removal in addition to the regular winter maintenance program for arterials, noting that 1 full snow removal costs $1.3 million. Stormwater costs for municipalities falls under the transportation area also. And there is a change in how we're recording the budget process from 18 to 19. By placing the money collected in stormwater revenue into a reserve and the capital infrastructure drawing from that reserve. There is no real change in the intent of the stormwater. However, the change in budgeting for funds results in a variance between the 2 years. Administration increases the contribution to reserves for water by doubling the contribution amount. There is a proposed increase in Parks and Recreation of $400,000. There is also an increase in our internal rent fees as we move the debenture principal payments from capital to operating. Again, just a change in how we are handling our expenses resulted in a variance between the budget years. There is a reduced contribution to capital program from our current year's taxes by $7 million. Finally, we are required to include amortization expenses in our budgeting process, but not required to fund it. Amortization sits at approximately $22 million. So if we go into our details, you'll see that this slide shows that the municipality's revenue sources for operating. Administration is looking at the municipal side of things at this time. We are excluding the school levies, which would not be available until sometime in March of 2019. So based on that 18 municipal tax rate and an estimated 2019 assessment, there is a little over 35 million tax dollars available. This is done to simply show how many more municipal dollars would be required for 19 versus what we collected in 18. So our revenue sources include small donations, and though we get more due to one-time donations, we don't typically budget for them in the event that we don't receive them. Franchise fees and concessions are around $6 million, fine revenue approximately $1.6 million. We have increased the investment income because we are entering into some longer investment terms to increase our return on investments, but still remain conservative in this process. Licenses and permits include business licenses, development permits, and bylaw permits, earning approximately $1 million. There are a number of operating grants, including MSI operating, FCSS, SASC revenue sharing grant, along with other small grants, for an overall total of $3 million. The transfer from reserves includes an internal draw on reserves, which will include funds not spent on the asset management project in 2018. It will be placed in an operating reserve and drawn on for 19 so that it's not taxed twice for the project. User fees and sales of goods include the majority of our revenue generators. Facility rent, sale of goods, utilities, land sales total approximately, user fees and sales of goods total approximately $33.3 million. Therefore, given our forecasted revenues for 19, the estimated tax levy for 19 based on 18 rates, we will derive approximately $81.9 million in revenues. This slide shows our expense projections for 2019. So with collecting large sums of money always comes uncollectibles. And while we have a process in place to reduce the write-offs, we have placed $60,000 in the budget, which is a total of 0.2% of our revenues. Bank charges are $91,000. Contracted services and goods, materials and repairs are where most of our expenses fall. Contracted services is up from 18 by a little more than $561,000. Most of that is due to adding a full snow removal. Goods, materials, and repairs is down from 18 by $604,000, so gaining some cost efficiencies there. Interest on long-term debt is payment on debentures and is down from 18 approximately $59,000. Principal debt payment is similar to 18. Salary and wages are at $30.8 million, of which include the new fire model and estimates from union negotiations. Our transfer to capital budgets are the funds from 19 taxes being forwarded to capital projects in 2019. The transfer to capital asset replacement reserve is a minimum allowed to replace the capital assets, which is 2%. And we certainly know that that's not sufficient or where we want it to be, but need to be careful on how to increase it without adversely affecting property taxes. Transfer to stormwater reserves. As mentioned earlier, this is the allocation of the utility bill to cover stormwater. The revenue covers operational expenses and then puts the remainder into reserves to be used for capital infrastructure. Transfer to utility reserves has been increased from 18, which was $1.1 million in 18, and is now proposed to be $2.3 million for 19. Transfers to operations includes putting aside funds for operation resiliency for extreme weather and unanticipated events resulting in a liability, and anticipated obligations for the future. Transfer to land development is the net from land sales minus costs to ensure land sales are not supporting the tax rate. Utilities includes telephone, water, power, electricity for municipal facilities. This is increased by a minimal amount of $290,000 to the $6 million. Overall proposed expenses are at $82,862,320. As a result of these projections, you can now see that if we were using the 18 tax rates to collect municipal taxes against the 2019 projected revenues and expenses, we would require an additional $946,000. 1% increase in the tax rate results in approximately $350,000. So we would need to increase the tax rate 2.7% to derive these funds. A little more into the detail. So previously we saw the slides were by function, and now let's look at the same information but by service area. So we see how their net costs affect the bottom line, which goes to the taxpayer. So property taxes, again using the 2018 rates, and a very small increase in assessment will derive $61,428 more without any tax increases. So this will decrease the bottom line. General revenues budgeted a total $571,000 for interest and investment income, and an increase of $225,000 from franchise fees. This increase in revenues will decrease the bottom line to the taxpayer. Transfer to reserves and capital program reduces the transfer to capital program $7 million while maintaining an operational resiliency reserve and obligations reserve for anticipated costs in the future. Council has an inflationary increase of $15,634, which increases the bottom line. The Office of the City Manager and the Executive Leadership Team has a decrease of $45,235, which reduces the bottom line. Legislative Services reduces their cost by $71,000, which offsets the citywide legal fee increase of $65,200. Property tax operating costs increased by $26,000, and a changeover to in-house assessment is approximately $157,000. Note, this includes the contractual obligations to the previous contractor of $76,000 to deliver the final year's assessment before going in-house. There is a bit of an overlap between ending the contract and going in-house, as there is a great deal of background work to prepare the assessment before going in-house. Finance and IT. The purchasing officer has moved to finance and is resulting in cost savings in the fleet area. Finance is increasing employee education slightly and decreasing internal rent and bank charges. It supports IT supports the citywide and results in software maintenance and subscriptions increases of $45,820. There's an increase in goods and materials of $45,000 and a purchase of iPads for census of $10,000. We've oversized the UPS battery for the RCMP building of $7,700 and a number of additional small printers for $2,000. Overall increase of $317,370, which increases the bottom line to taxpayer. Communications shows an inflationary cost, which increases the bottom line. Employee relations, training, and safety. Note, safety was distributed citywide in 2018 and is now being isolated in a designated costing area for 19. So the variance is high here, but would contribute to lower variance to the rest of the city. It includes $30,000 for safety accommodations and working alone monitoring and reasonable suspicion testing. It increases the bottom line. Engineering, GIS, has inflationary costs to expenses increases the internal rent and a decrease to office rent. Increases in employee education, conventions and expenses of $9,000. Asset management project supported as a draw from reserves, and the GIS program has an increase to employee education convention and expenses of $3,000. Overall expense increases $37,428 for an increase to the bottom line. Planning and development shows a decrease to the bottom line due to studies of $340,000 being moved to the capital budget for 2019, and we'll see a related increase in the capital side. There are some increases to licenses and permit revenue of $12,500, but also an increase in contracted services of $58,500 to review the city bylaw and regulated standards, as well as inflationary expenses. Overall, there's a decrease of $127,421, which supports the decrease in the bottom line in operating. Economic development has inflationary impacts on the service area and increases in contracted services of $72,000, including $30,000 for Discover Administered partnerships and $25,000 for research and development. Grant applications, Stats Canada data sets, and gap analysis include increases to memberships and subscriptions of $11,000. Overall increase of $189,937 for an increase to the bottom line. Land development removed the community development project expenses, resulting in a decrease in the bottom line. Protective services changes in revenue calculations for fines resulted in overstating the forecasting in 2018. Revenues included a raw fine revenue and intended to include contracted services as an expense. So only the net would be reported, but the expenses were missed. 2019 have budgeted for a more realistic number. However, the variance has a negative impact on the comparison between the 2 years. Fire includes the new fire model and standards, approximately $1.1 million in costs. Our CMP contract was adjusted to be more realistic number for the contract. Overall increase is $1.9 million to the bottom line. Under transportation, we're budgeting for a full snow removal, $500,000 on top of the regular maintenance of $262,000. Adjusted the internal fleet expenses to cover their costs to all other departments, but have not included a contribution to reserves for fleet replacement. Stormwater is included under transportation, and the net of the revenues here are being put to reserves, which are mentioned earlier, impacts the variance between years as it wasn't put into reserves in 18. Overall transportation has a $2.1 million increase on the bottom line. Water, sanitary sewer, solid waste show an overall, the revenue supporting operations is reduced from $11.7 million to $9.8 million because the contribution to water reserves has increased from 1.1 to 2.3 million to reserves. It also includes debenture principal of $583,721 shown in capital in 2018. Even though the overall revenue is decreased, it does support a decrease to the bottom line. FCSS community program, the CHIP program is not included in 2019. It was just a savings of $45,000. The community program is reduced by $9,000, and a decrease in internal rent results in an overall decrease of $63,542 to the bottom line. Cemetery is, the costing for cemetery is being coded to parks until we have a better allocation of the staff time. In addition, there's a decrease in goods, materials, and repairs of $21,000 for an overall decrease to the bottom line of $77,170. Parks and Recreation includes the Lloydminster Golf and Country Club in-house for a cost of $197,943. The Russ Robertson Arena debenture costs are moved from capital to operating for $133,000, and increase to plant operators taking over the spray park, and $50,000 for contracted services for plant maintenance. Overall, there's an increase of $443,668 to increase the bottom line. The Administered Culture and Science Center is anticipating a grant of $30,451 for the MAP salary grant, and inflationary cost expenses resulting in an overall increase of $112,394 to the bottom line. The third-party asks have been included in here and reduced by $122,000 that was allocated to the golf LGCC in 18. Otherwise, it can be adjusted by council's determination on the third-party asks going forward. Building maintenance includes debenture payments of 1.2 from the capital project. This section is not complete at this point, and it shows an overall increase to the bottom line of $2 million, due mostly to the debenture and not having the revenues to support the cost from internal rents. Before the next presentation, there's our intent that we will zero out the costing center so that you will see in the next version that it is zero. Other service areas will see a slight increase, however, it will not have an impact on the bottom line. So now you can see that the variance is the same as what we said earlier from the function slides. Our increase is $955,814. When we utilize the 2018 tax rate on a minimal assessment road, the overall variance between 18 and 19 will be $956,363. If council is accepting of this draft, it will result in a 2.7% increase in our tax rates to support this additional cost. If we move on to the capital budget, the highlights include, please note that the list of capital programs presented to the executive leadership team included $53,242,958 worth of projects. The projects were placed into priority 1 and 2 categories. Administration is presently only presenting priority 1 projects for council's administration in this council's consideration in this budget. Priority 1s include $48,208,958. Included in here, we have the wastewater treatment plant, carried forward from 2018, $9 million, approximately $80 million project. It will include federal, provincial, and municipal cost sharing. We've included drainage channel improvements, $5,179,000. Street improvements and rehab include $6.6 million. Water and wastewater replacement, $3.2 million. Airport runway rehab, $5,790,000, and there's a grant, 100% grant to support that project if it's moving forward. We've included the Martin Brown School demolition and area concept plan for a total of $350,000. The 2020 Summer Games, we're looking at $500,000 of city contribution to projects to support that initiative into 2020. Traffic control and coordination upgrades totaling $796,000. The priority 1s were split into the following areas. Information technology, $264,900. Engineering, $30,227,409. Public safety, $756,933. Transportation services, $7,552,274. Environmental services has capital of $2,988,323. Parks, $422,000. Building maintenance, $542,000. Land development, $950,000. Recreation and culture, $3,645,000 and 119. Administration is looking at 120,000. Planning and development's $390,000. Economic development's at $350,000 for a total of $48,208,958. So this is our funding sources for the capital projects. Capital grants between 18 and 19 has, for 19 we have $22,332,547. Transfers from capital reserves, so they were handled a little differently, and so they're not really comparable. The 5.2 in 2018 was from property tax dollars. The 14,000 million listed there is prior year's funds that haven't been spent on and are carried forward in 2019. So that's not new property tax dollars. Under land sales, we have $936,240. Equipment trade-in value of $50,000. Other funding sources of $315,000. Transfer of operating revenue. In 2018, it was $18 million. In 2019, we are forwarding from property tax dollars $9 million. A transfer from water reserves, $2,360,636. Transfer from storm sewer reserves, $1,685,936. For a total revenue of $51,233,465. This slide breaks down the capital projects. So you can see that in 19 we have considerable projects carried forward of $28,969,883. And we have new capital projects of $19,239,075. You can see, as I mentioned earlier, that the debenture principles were recorded in the capital. That has now been taken out. Transfer to capital replacement policy. We have a policy in the books, and we are putting the minimal to capital replacement of $460,000, which is 2%. This leads us to a contribution to capital reserves of $2,564,507 that council has available to put towards targeted capital projects. So that gives us the total costs or expenses on the capital side of $51,233,465, which balances the capital. This little graph just shows that council we've put forward $2 million for council to put towards targeted capital infrastructure to be determined at a later date. And we've put aside $564,507 towards capital asset replacement. So how will this impact our residents? So at this time, based on 2.7 municipal tax increase, assuming that there's no changes in assessed market value. So your house, say your house is worth $250 in 2018 and is still worth $250 in 2019. Holding the school taxes constant, it will derive $43 more on a house that's valued at $250. A house that's valued at $350 will pay $60 more. A house valued at $500,000 will pay $86 more. When we get to the commercial side of things, doing the same thing based on 2.7% municipal tax increase, and assuming there's no assessment market value increase or school taxes. A property valued at $500,000 will pay $154 more in 19 at a 2.7% increase. $1 million assessment will pay $309 more, and a $1.5 million assessment will pay $463 more. Based on that, this is our first draft of the 2019 budget, and it proposes an increase of 2.7%. This allows the City of Lloydminster to keep pace with inflationary costs, sustain service levels, and continue to build important operational and capital reserves. Administration anticipates having the second draft budget document presented to Council during the regular City Council meeting on Monday, November 26th. I'm open for your questions.
Thank you, Chief Financial Officer. Councillor Torson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Before we get to the whole question portion, I just wanted to say that overall, it can be difficult sometimes to follow because we change the way we look at the world from year to year. In terms of what gets included as capital, where do we include debt repayments, all that fun stuff. So it's hard to look at 1 year to the year prior and really have a true comparison. However, this way so far is my favorite, and I think that the finance team, with essentially the third different person we've had presenting this information in our time in council is by far the best and most impressive. So I'd like to applaud all of administration for that at this point. By far, the best that's ever been done for this city, as far as maybe back in the Breco days it was just as good, but I was in high school. So anyway, to finish that off, so I have a handful of small questions, but one of the first comments I wanted to say is I like that there is a targeted capital investment for council to pick an asset that we want to direct funds to, so we can say, okay, community, this is where we're putting our priorities, and we're going to raise funds for this particular item. I think it's important that we, in the not too distant future, get an idea of what that looks like, seeing as, if you've heard me in the past, I can be critical of other groups that don't necessarily direct their funds and sit on them. But my first big real question is, do we think that we can actually spend $51 million, seeing as, to be honest, we didn't necessarily have the people to be able to complete our capital asset program this year? Do we believe with sincerity that we'll be able to basically have the people available, the consultants available to actually complete all the projects that we're saying we want to complete? Because I can see that there was a huge carryover from this year. And I know some of those are big dollar ones that will take up a huge portion of that, but I'm just curious whether we believe that we can actually get all that done.
I'll just entertain a response from the administration.
Yeah, thank you for the question. That was a major discussion point for administration through the budget process, and I would suggest that when we look at the 2018 carry forward, it is higher than normal, but I guess we look at two in particular. Don might be able to add a third. We have the $9 million for the wastewater treatment plant that's included in that number. We also had $3 million for 40th Avenue that was on there. That was when we went into last year's budget, we were pretty sure that it would be a difficult challenge to get ahead. So I think we've got the design work done, and I believe there's some drainage projects in there that they just didn't get to. That was one of the questions we put towards our administrative team, and they're very confident that we'll be able to tackle and complete the projects being listed.
So just as a follow-up, at least half of that carryover is from those three major projects then. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so and the airport was another one at 5.7. So that was grant funded, but it was included in that. It's included in that carryover.
And if I'm not mistaken, was there? Sorry, am I not on? Was there one at the golf course as well? That was a large dollar amount that was already budgeted for? I thought there was one for something, but I can't remember what it was off the top of my head.
The irrigation project, now relatively small in comparison to those other projects.
Yeah.
I think carryover was around $290,000.
Okay.
Councilor Baker.
Thank you. A lot of stuff here in a very short time. I think we got to take some time and have time to read it before we start going too far into it. Because, for example, we got the carryover of how much? The question was, how much of that, in my mind, was funded and unfunded? You know what I mean? If we're talking capital projects, how much was funded last year? I don't even know now. I just have to know.
I can give you that answer. So the carry forward is 28 million. What's funded out of that, if you can go back to one more page. There's capital gains of 22 million, but prior year's funding coming forward is 14.4 million.
Yeah, I'm sure it's all there, just to get
It's
it
all
all
there.
put together here. That's not new funding, that's existing funding. That's one thing, so that's okay. I had some questions, more so on assessment. Now we can.
Sure.
We're saying that if the assessment doesn't move, we're going to have a 2% increase based on this draft. And that's all it is, a draft. What if it goes up or what if it goes down?
So if
Well, I know how you changed the amount, but are we going to change the percentage? Like if the assessment went up 5%, or hypothetical case, I have no idea what it would go up or down. But if it went up, the assessment went up 5%, then you would lower what?
So then you'd have to lower the tax rate.
Yeah.
But it's important to determine what you need to operate the city for the next year and take into account your growth, which was minimal for us this year.
But the dollar wouldn't change.
But the dollar amount required will not change unless there's something between now and May.
How are we going to deal if the assessment went down 10 or 15%? Are you going to set a mill rate and deal with it before you have the assessment roll? Or are you going to deal with it once you get the assessment roll?
What's important to the taxpayer is how much they pay in taxes. So if their assessment goes down, then the tax rate goes up, but what they pay in dollars will be similar.
But it wasn't. Last year we had some real weird spikes in our assessment.
Certainly.
That's what I'm worried about.
It's important that we look at sample properties and look for the anomalies out there that jump too much. We'll be diligent on making sure that we're aware of how that's going to impact people.
Well, some were really impacted last year. Not all, but some really got whacked. And I still haven't got it figured out why. Nobody explained to me, as a council member, why there was a big spike. Some people did a very good job. I thought I saw Scott in there. Thanks, Scott. But there was some pretty serious issues there last year. We needed 40-50% increase. Those are serious. And we got to think about that. So I don't need an answer today, but we have to make sure we don't need to panic and pass the budget tomorrow morning. We should get all the information first. You can have an interim budget if you need it for the first quarter till you have that proper information. But I know last year it spooked a lot of people. And that's really my issue. So, thank you.
Questions?
On the, I think it was economic development had 350,000. Is that for those studies or I was wondering why they would have capital? I was trying to wrap my head around it.
Increase in contracted services of 72,000, which include 30,000 for Discover Lloydminster Partnership and 25,000 for research and development, grant applications, Stats Canada, data sets, and gap analysis. It also includes memberships and subscriptions of 11,000, which is local intel data subscription, $6,300, STR data subscriptions, hotel occupancies of 2,500, town information subscriptions, and website package of 2,200.
Okay.
Yeah, just to add to that, there's a couple of capital projects related to economic development. One is around the Aerotropolis study that is on the books for 2019, as well as entrance signs coming into our communities within the capital budget as well.
Any other additional questions? Councilor Corson.
Thank you, Your Worship. The other question I had is just around, something that was talked about a lot around the time that we passed the mill rate and passed the budget in the prior year as far as weaning ourselves off of utility revenues. I know the format has changed a little bit in how we look at that on the sheet, but is that something that we've continued to do to make sure that we're at a point where when we need to make long-term debt payments on our new wastewater treatment plant that we have the funding and ability to do that?
We're still on target for a 5-year moving away from utilities to taxes. I think we can achieve that for sure.
Okay.
And because we're putting away 2.3 million in reserves for utilities, we should be able to support the debenture payment.
Okay. Yeah, and that's really what's important is so we can get to that point where it's actually something that we can do, because under the previous model, there just wasn't a way to necessarily make those debt repayment models in a true kind of utility model where utilities are kept separate from programs and services that are paid for by property taxes. So it's a direction that I thought was important that we start with last year and continue on with this year. And it appears as though we're continuing on with that, and actually the dollar figure is growing as far as the amount that we're weaning off, which is important in the long run to be able to fund that wastewater treatment plant.
I'm thinking that the debenture, we could draw the funds in multiple draws also. So as we're building it, we don't need to borrow the whole money up front, that we can borrow some of it and use it as a cash flowing item, and then our payments start out lower and extend over time, right?
Okay. So just to follow up on that would be like a way to ladder the loans so that some end sooner at smaller amounts and some end, with larger amounts happening at different times and that kind of thing. Okay.
One of the questions I'd like to pose to administration, having gone through the surveys and comments, certainly council members of administration also heard from the public. Did we hear from an area that people wanted to see less services? I know it's a strange question, but did we hear from anyone that said, well, maybe we should trim here or there rather than deliver the services that we have today? Because I think that's one of the challenges that we need to remind taxpayers and ourselves. We have got a level of services. Those cost money. And at one point or another, something has to give. So either we increase or we decrease. We can increase taxes to maintain those services, or we can decrease taxes and decrease the services. Or not necessarily decrease the taxes, but no tax increase. So I think, is there been any area, because I see the areas of the community engagement, and I think the budget has addressed those, streets, the financial position of the city, recreation, traffic, and protective services, community safety. But are we missing anything on the other side?
I'll take a quick peek back in the middle there. All indications are people were wanting to maintain or enhance the service levels, so we didn't see anything that's a decrease or take away something we're doing.
And that was the general feeling I had, and I think council members heard the same, but I just wanted to make sure we weren't missing anything in the comments, because, at the end of the day, the services we have, we've been very fortunate. We have a great city, we've got a great level of service that's been provided, and I know it's been a learning process for this council as we went through. This is now our 3rd budget that we're being looked at and being judged on from the perspective of trying to put this all into perspective, because at the end of the day, it's a lot of money, but it does have to come from somewhere to pay for the expenses that our city incurs. And then you simply can't wave a wand and you get less. Even though we would like to see less snow and a few other things, we're not as fortunate as Calgary with the 15-degree temperature, so I guess we'll leave it at that and go from there. Councilor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I had a few other comments, I suppose, and one's more or less a question, and I don't want to dive too deep into the weeds, but how exactly do you set the service standard for one snow clearing per year? Is there just a set date, or does snow have to rise to a certain number of inches to know that you're getting the right snow clearing that day? So when I look at this, I think that's something really important for people to understand. A, that this is just a first draft that we're looking at, but B, it includes a snow clearing that comes at basically the entire cost of, or more, of the overall increase for property taxes. And the people spoke in terms of the community engagement that they want to see snow clearing. My question is just for administration, how do you do that from a practical standpoint of picking the right weather event that says that that's the one that you clear snow? Does it happen at the end of the season? Does it happen midway through the season? I don't know how you practically do that without potentially getting another major snow event or another snow event that requires some level of clearing. So I'm just curious how that works. And I think Rodney would be an expert coming from a place with lots of snow.
Before I entertain your answer, Rodney, I'd like to just work on a terminology that I've tried to communicate, and I know our communications team has. There's a difference between snow clearing. Our city clears snows on a daily basis when it snows. Our team at the roads get out there and they're plowing snow as early as they can in the morning. They plow until the streets are plowed. That can be plowed or cleared. Snow removal is where I think you're headed to, Councillor, and I appreciate your comment and the question. I'll look to Rodney for his answer, but snow removal happens downtown when it's required again because there's nowhere to plow that snow. But before we go into the residential areas and plow and grade and haul away $1.4 million worth of taxpayers' money, I want to make sure that people understand that's what we're doing and that's when we'll do it. But now I'll look to Rodney and ask for some clarity because I think it's so important that we make sure we got our terminology squared away.
So the answer is we really don't have a definitive answer of when we actually go. Last year we talked about moving in somewhere around the middle of March, and we got a break in the weather that held us off, and then we got some more bad weather, and we were getting a lot of snow clearing place in residential areas. And just to explain the residential snow removal, what we will do with graders and plows on these residential streets, and the bulk of the cost will be hiring external dump trucks, these type of things to remove the snow. So, it would be something that myself and the director Dave and mayor and city manager would discuss, when you actually do that. And yes, you're right, if you got, a lot of snow in 1 year, you would possibly have to do two. And your question about back east, what they do is a complete different model. You just plow it to the side, into people's driveways and onto people's lines each time. So essentially, you're doing a snow removal every time you clear up an event. So here, we basically do a completely different model. And there are environmental factors that cause those models to be different.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, Rodney talked about potential for maybe a second. The money in the budget does not include the money we put away last year and we'll put away again this year. I believe it's in the nature of $700,000 to a resiliency fund to assist for that unknown that we can't forecast every year. So we put the money in the budget for one, and plus there is money in a resiliency fund that will assist in case we had to do that second or so forth. So I'm trying to get to a point where one will be the norm in terms of budgeting, and then we'll have some money in reserves to supplement if needed for an additional one or possibly two if required.
So just a quick question, because as I'm thinking that, the way we're currently doing snow removal, I think generally is fine. Certainly people with smaller vehicles have the biggest challenge and they get stuck and can't do anything. But the part I was thinking about is that, the trigger for me is safety. So if you can't get an ambulance in there or you can't get a fire truck in there, you have a problem. You have to be able to make sure you can provide those other essential services. And so those have to, in my mind, be a key part of making that decision. And police, for that matter, coming in, because if there's a crime in progress, you want to be able to make sure you have members that are able to respond and support you. So I think some of those things are intuitive, but on the other hand, we hope to heck those situations don't happen that often.
It's been a wait-and-see game, I know, since being elected. Certainly, I think everyone around this side of the table has heard it from more than enough people wondering when we're going to do that snow clearing or snow removal. That's why I wanted to make sure we specify those terminologies the best as we can, because the snow removal is a 1.3 to 1.5 million, average $1.4 million cost. So I think residents can be, I want to make sure they're cognizant of that cost, but at the same time, as you pointed out, Councillor Chuck, that it's very important that the city administration does take the safety of the residents very seriously in ensuring that at that point the trigger is going to get pulled. And as Roger mentioned last year, Mother Nature started out really well. We warmed up, and in 3 days, 4 days, we had black asphalt showing up in a lot of spots, and then it cooled right off again and left us kind of hanging. And the challenge is, when do you mobilize the troops? In this case, that's the question. Knowing that the money's in the budget makes me feel a lot better, because it's there. Taxpayers have paid for it. It's there. It's set aside in the budget. But at the same token, if we can survive the winter, people are cautious about putting snow on their lawns rather than on the streets if they can when they're clearing the driveways and sidewalks, makes it just that much better. And then we wait for Mother Nature to do her thing as she goes through with the winter, because if we stay cool until March and then all of a sudden a quick spring melt, we may be able to get by it, but we may not. And that's a tough question.
Well, I was going to add too, I think that many provinces in the east make it mandatory that you change to snow tires or lifts in winter. And we don't have that mandatory in our province. And I think once vehicles, it's mandatory for us, those vehicles have a little bit of a better chance certainly to get through the snow. The way, if it does pack up. Otherwise, if they don't have appropriate tires, they're just not going anyways.
Councillor Torres.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple other questions. One of the things that was noted was just was kind of a discussion around our capital asset management. I'm just curious, where are we at with the overall program? Are we still relatively close to square one, or do we expect that to be something we finish in 2019 or 2020? Because if I'm understanding the strategy of the administration, kind of the big picture strategy would be looking at our capital and saying maybe we're biting off more than we can chew all at once. So we're bringing some of these things down in terms of projects and getting this capital asset management program complete to a point where it can help us prioritize all those projects and we can get the right ones done in the right amount of time and help inform future budgets and future capital budgets. I'm just making sure I'm on the right page when I make that assumption.
The capital asset project is a multi-year project. They're in the initial phases of it. So if you want more details on that, we'll probably have to call Terry up to answer to that. But it will be at least a 5-year project, and it's in the initial phases, so it will not be completed in 2019.
Okay.
I was going to add, I think one of the challenges last year this year is that we've had some vacancies that we just struggled to fill. So that's impacted more than one department. And makes you don't have the ability to have all the horsepower you need to make these projects happen. So I think we're still in that transition piece where you're not getting people in that place for 6 months or more and have a full team. And once we have that, I think we'll see, I'm hoping we'll see some differences.
Certainly. Any comments?
Yeah, I would agree with that statement for sure.
Councillor Torres.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to move this cap because I keep not being able to see this. The last one, the other major highlight that I know is mentioned as a highlight, and it's one that we kind of already knew, is the fire department. For the public to understand is that we are going to this interim model with the fire department, and that's one of the other biggest changes. So overall, when you look at the numbers that are in those operational highlights, 1.1 million to the fire department, 1.6 million for snow removal, and 1.1 million for reserves that we're continuing to wean ourselves off in that area for water. That's pretty huge that we can get to a point where we're at a 2.7% increase, or 900,000 that we're increasing even at this time. And I think administration's done a tremendous job to get us to a point where that's a 2.7% projected increase right now. Would it be nice for there to be a little more wiggle room on that? Yeah, probably. No increases are better than some increases, but we have to be realistic that things do cost more from year to year, and we have to be strategic with our investments as far as making sure we get the right projects done at the right time. So I think we have to be cognizant of that. But overall, I'd say administration getting, you know, that value on the operations side, getting those expenses included in this, while also keeping that increase to a much more palatable number than maybe one that we've seen in the past, I think is very, very impressive. That's all.
I just had one last comment. I think it's really important that we share it and celebrate it, because I think we heard from Councillor Bakers that, you know, for a number of years now, we've talked about, you know, a replacement for the library. And we're not going to replace anything unless we begin a capital reserve. And we've heard people talk about wanting a pool, we've heard library, we have our science cultural center. We have a lot of places that need to be addressed in terms of facilities. And we've certainly begun the discussion on a facilities plan. But if you have nothing in the bank, you can do all the talking you want and get absolutely nothing done. So the fact that we're beginning that process, I think, positions us better as a city council, whether it's 1 year, 2 year, 5 years from now, to be able to actually make some things happen. So I think that's a very important step.
Councillor,
thank you, Worship. I just want to take a second to say hi to all you guys in the back of the room there who spent an awful pile of time putting all this together to bring to the senior team here at the office. You drive by here in the last number of months, there's been a number of vehicles sitting out in the parking lot at weird hours. They weren't left here overnight. People were working really hard at getting these budgets all together, presenting them, and then bringing them forward to be presented to us in a first draft here. So for me at least, that's not lost on me at all. So thank you very much on behalf of everybody in the city, because I think, like Councilor Torreson said, this is one of the better ones we've seen going forward. It's transparent, it's open, it's showing everything. We're not going to have to, in my opinion, go back to the drawing board and redo complete drafts from front to back, and a lot of that goes into all the work that was done behind the scenes that nobody sees. They see a finished product like this draft, but they don't see the hundreds of hours that gets taken to put it to this point. So on behalf of everybody, thank you.
Very well said, Councillor. Certainly I think that between Councillor Torreson and Kern, he covered a number of my highlights that I saw in the discussion today. But certainly there will be a change in assessment process, simply from a contractor to in-house, and I think people need to realize that's going to, I believe, improve the service from their perspective. I've heard from people wondering why we need someone from out of town, and it was a tendered contract position that was awarded years ago, but council has worked with administration, and administration has brought forward a proposal that's been accepted to move that assessment in-house. So I think that people will find a little different perspective where they'll call City Hall and be able to actually speak to their assessor moving forward. Now that's going to be a transition period, but it's in the budget, it's there, and that will be a huge change for taxpayers that have had concerns about assessment and want to speak to that assessor. As you alluded to, Councilor Baker, we know assessment plays a huge part. It's one of 3 parts in this process. We're looking at a budget, there'll be an assessment done on properties, and followed by the mill rate. So I think that plays a huge part. I think as we go back and look at what the comments from people, if we look at the capital investment in streets, we're going to continue to invest in streets and traffic, because I hear that quite regularly. I think people traverse the city as they travel across. They get frustrated with the lights. I know we've got some more work to be done yet this fall, but we're going to deal with that. Recreation is still a very high priority, and I can't expect it not to change, because we have a young and vibrant city. Certainly, from the perspective of a financial report, I think thank you very much, Chief Financial Officer, to the team and administration for a budget that lays out a very clear, concise budget to start with. Appreciate there's not a huge deficit, but at the same time, there is a tax increase that we will wrestle through. And lastly, protective services and the community safety is on the top of everybody's mind, and that is addressed in this budget. There are some changes coming, and we appreciate those accordingly, and we will deal with those as we go. So, from a perspective, is it a great news budget? Any increase is not a great news budget, but it's a relatively good news budget, because it's not going to be one that I don't think is unreasonable, that we can reach to the end and come up with a reasonable budget approval by this council for the residents, taxpayers, and the businesses of this community. Any other comments? Thank you very much, Chief Financial Officer, administration. Very much appreciated. Moving to the agenda. Inquiries to the media, or from the media, I should say. We have inquiries.
Your Worship, there are media requests for yourself, Mayor Albers, as well as Councilors Baker and Dychak.
I'll look to council for a recess.
Sure.
Councillor Buckingham, seconded. Councillor Fagin, all in favor? Opposed? Carried.